I think I got my entire school pregnant. So this morning I was auditioning the finger puppets, if you know what I'm talking about, in the school bathroom, and when I finally emptied my magazine, it happened so violently that my gentleman's relish came out like an aerosol spray and dissipated into the air faster than my hope for a future is disappearing now. Anyways, I think it spread throughout the entire school like an airborne virus because nobody has gotten their period. So now I'm sobbing into my pillow because I don't think I can support 850 kids. What should I do?
Skin professionals, what's something you've had to tell a client that you thought for sure was common knowledge? I once mistook my 20-year-old client for a grandma and she got so mad she threw her bowl of cucumber mask at me. For context, I've been an esthetician for 5 years at a high-end spa with rich clients, so I rarely treat people with scaly, pimply or dirty faces since they've already managed to get perfect skin. That's why I was surprised that I had a client who had all that, and more. Her skin was dry, and she had every kind of wrinkle, like forehead lines, crow's feet, and lines that ran from her mouth to her chin. I had no idea how she had skin this bad, but I really wanted to clear it. I wanted her to look and feel flawless, and while I was willing to put in the work, I knew it was going to be tough, especially because when she laid down on my facial bed I saw her other imperfections up close. She had pores the size of golf balls, skin blemishes and acne, and her face was so red I thought she was blushing when she saw me. So I got right to work. First I used a hydrating cleanser to cleanse the skin without stripping it of moisture. Then I used a mild chemical exfoliant to remove dead skin cells, followed by a facial steamer to open up her pores and soften her skin. I extracted her blackheads and my hand almost went limp from how many I had to extract. We were already halfway into our session and she hadn't said a word. I'm a blabbermouth and the silence was killing me. So while I was mixing her bowl of cucumber I told her I thought it was great that old women were taking care of their skin too, since most of our clientele are young women who are 20 to 40 years old. She sat upright on the bed and asked me how old I thought she was. I told her I thought she was a grandma, and that I didn't know retirement homes allowed visits to the spa. In an instant, she looked redder than when she first walked in, and I knew I messed up. She grabbed the bowl I was mixing and threw it at me. I looked down at my slimy covered clothes that looked like someone had jizzed all over me, and asked her why she would do that. I had half a mind to fire her as a client and ban her from the spa, but she slammed her ID in my face, and after some quick mental math I realized she was actually 22. She stood there with her hands crossed and eyebrows furrowed. I immediately apologized for being rude and unprofessional. I was even in the middle of debating between giving her a discount or a free session to make up for my insults. But then she asked me why I thought she was in a retirement home, and I told her that she had more wrinkles than any 22-year-old I knew. She sat down on my facial bed and said I was right, and that I wasn't the first person to think she was so old. She said all her friends were embarrassed to have her around so they just stopped inviting her to places, and whenever she talked to guys they said they weren't interested in cougars. She started using tons of makeup to cover her face up, but it ended up looking cakey from how much she had to put just to cover her pores. She choked back a sob and she nearly broke down on my facial bed. I couldn't just sit there and watch her cry, so I told her that I had something she could use, and showed her the sunscreen that our spa sells. I explained that we sell a growth factor sunscreen because it doesn't have any harmful chemicals, rubs out clear and its gel-like texture feels great on the skin. The sunscreen protects the skin while rejuvenating it as well. My client asked me how that would help, and I told her that I treat high-end clientele who religiously buy the growth factor sunscreen every time they come in for a treatment. I never had to treat them for wrinkles, acne or other skin conditions like I had to do with her, or any of my other non-high-end clients, because the rich people's skin was always flawless. They just came in for a relaxing spa day. I explained that this was only the case with my rich clients, because they decide to spend a bit more on sunscreen than the average person, but it saves them thousands on other skincare products and extensive treatments from me. And I was sure that if she saw them, she would assume they had work done because they didn't have any wrinkles or hyperpigmentation and looked young, despite being older than my client. But the rich don't compromise their skin. Instead they maintain their natural beauty by using things like the growth factor sunscreen. I made sure to tell my client that my rich clientele apply the sunscreen every day, not just on sunny days because UV rays still penetrate windows and clouds, and it prevents their skin from being damaged and breaking out. That's why they invest in it, and they never have to worry about hyperpigmentations and breakouts or any other skin problems that normal people have. My client then asked how a sunscreen was able to keep rich people from aging, so I explained that the growth factor sunscreen had a clinically studied ingredient called kynotin. Kynotin prevents aging in the skin by protecting the DNA and skin cells from all sorts of damage. It directly reduces roughness on the skin, wrinkles and uneven pigmentation as well. Since my client had wrinkled skin, applying something with kynotin on her skin would improve the feeling of her skin, to make it soft and smooth. I recommended she use the sunscreen too if she wanted naturally perfect skin like my rich clients, but she almost freaked out when she saw the price. I explained to her that people spend thousands on clothes, makeup, and equipment to make their bodies look good. However, our skin is one of the only things you can never take off, so you can never cheap out on it. Buying cheap skin care products means your skin isn't getting the highest quality of protection and care that it needs, so this will definitely ruin your skin in the future. That's why the rich tend to spend more on their skincare products, especially their sunscreen, because the most important part of your skincare routine is SPF protection, and that's why their skin looks better than all poor people's skin. Besides, we really needed to get the fundamentals right. Otherwise, she'll have to live with damaged wrinkly skin for the rest of her life, and never have a chance at clear skin. To further ease her mind, I mentioned that the growth factor sunscreen doubles as a primer, so she could implement it in her makeup routine and it wouldn't make her face cakey. That way, her makeup would look flawless and she would be protecting her skin barrier when she goes outside. After explaining it that way, she agreed to use the sunscreen daily, and I scheduled her for a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks after I finished her session. When she returned, I barely recognized her until she slammed her ID in my face again. Once she sat down on my facial bed, she let me know that she applied the sunscreen every day and she couldn't believe how much her complexion had changed. Her skin looked smoother and healthier, and she liked how pretty that made her look. Every time she applied it, she had a rejuvenating feeling that gave her more confidence to tackle her day. And honestly, it seemed like it calmed her stress, which meant she wasn't getting new wrinkles on her face. Her crow's feet were nearly gone and the lines that ran from her mouth to her chin, which weren't that apparent to begin with, were fully gone. She also got rid of all her other skincare products because the growth factor sunscreen was the only thing she actually needed to clear her skin. She talked about how applying sunscreen while indoors made a huge difference to her face because it always gave her a consistent natural look, and she could feel her skin barrier improving. With that, her skin blemishes disappeared and her cheeks weren't nearly as red as the first time I saw her. Now that her skin was improving, everyone around her noticed the difference. She told me that people were being nicer to her in public, so she was finally making friends again, and she was getting free treats from guys at stores and getting called pretty, along with them asking for her number. She said people usually kept their distance from her and she wasn't used to all the attention, but she really liked it. This made her stress levels drop dramatically. Surprisingly, she also mentioned that her mom had started using the growth factor sunscreen and her skin was hydrated so well she was looking younger by the day. I told her that the difference between people who use growth factor sunscreen versus normal sunscreen is that they will look younger, like they're in their 20s, while others will look more like grandmas, like she had first looked like when I saw her. She didn't appreciate that comment, but at least she'll stop being called a cougar now. Keep in mind, the only thing she was using on her skin was a growth factor sunscreen by Sunray and her skin was already starting to clear up. I knew now that her fundamentals were getting set, all that was left was treating her pores and other acne problems. If you are struggling with hyperpigmentation especially, I would recommend you look for a growth factor sunscreen. It can truly be a game changer for your skin. But I was glad she was finally starting to be happy with her appearance since the first time I saw her I almost threw up too.
Divorced men and women, what was the final straw? Man, do I have a story for you. I received a phone call from my sister one night. She was crying so profusely that I could hardly understand what she was saying. I could hear a loud commotion in the background and she was trying not to speak loudly. Apparently my dad's friend came over to the house and asked if he could speak to my mom outside, alone. My dad and sister were inside the house, and he goes to her, saying that when mom comes back inside, she is going to be very angry and there is going to be a lot of screaming, but whatever happens, he wanted to let my sister know that he still loves her. Mom came back inside, and sure enough, chaos ensues. Apparently my dad has been banging this guy's wife for 8 years. Not only that, he had also been sleeping with multiple women for close to 16 years. My parents were married for close to 27 years. Then the story gets more interesting. So my mom gave him one last chance. I don't know why, but they started going to therapy, marriage counseling, the works. My mom gets news that she has early stage 3 breast cancer. My whole family is incredibly supportive for my mother during this time. Both my sisters went and got pink ribbon tattoos in support of her battle. Then one day while I was working, I got a phone call that my mother was in the hospital and the doctor did not know if she was going to make it. My dad was severely against me flying back home, saying she was going to be fine, it was going to be a waste of money for me to come back, blah blah blah. Then my sister called me that night and said mom wanted me home. I flew home on the next available flight and made it to the hospital early in the morning. I was not prepared to see the shell of a person that my mother had become because of the chemotherapy. I was in town until she made it out of the hospital, which thankfully was only a week. During that time I stayed with my mom. She would constantly make stabbing remarks at my dad, while he sat next to her. Honestly, he was acting like a jerk to my sisters and myself. Constantly asking if we were going to be at the hospital, where we were sleeping for the night, just trying to keep tabs on us the whole time. It was surreal for me to see my parents act like this, especially while she was dying. My mother made a full recovery. I flew back to where I'm staying now after she moved back to the house and I knew she was going to be alright. My dad was just being a jerk and saying that he knew she was going to make it, and kept nagging at me for wasting money. Well, a few weeks later, my mom saw on my dad's phone that while my mom was in the hospital dying of cancer, he had not 1, not 2, but at least 3 women in my mom's bed that he was sleeping with. He had the nerve to do that while she was in the hospital. That's why he didn't want me to fly home and try to keep tabs on everyone. Turns out one of the chicks he had been banging is in charge of the local breast cancer center as well. Their divorce finalized in April. From what I hear, he's in a relationship with both of the women that he was cheating on my mom with. The one being that one guy's wife, and the other the cancer employee. Polyamorous relationship apparently. Mom flew back east and couldn't be happier. Just goes to show, life can be its own soap opera.
My husband is forcing me to move back in with my parents. My husband and I have been together for 4 years. I moved into his flat that he had been renting for a few years before we met. He's now saved up enough money to get a mortgage on a house. It's always been his dream, and I went to all the viewings with him and even helped him decide. It only took a few months for him to find one. He asked me to buy it with him, But at the time I wasn't in a position to be able to afford it, and he said he wasn't willing to wait for me. I said that I would still like to live with him in the house and would pay rent and bills as normal. He wanted this too, but due to the monthly payments on his mortgage being so high, he was asking for much more than I could afford per month. I was hunting for a better paying job, and he knew this. Out of nowhere I learned that two of his single male friends, one being a substance addict and the other having a criminal record for domestic violence, will move in with him instead, without even talking to me about it first. So, apparently he wasn't willing to wait for me. A couple of weeks later I then secured a better paying job and can afford the rent costs he was originally asking for. He still hasn't moved in, but now he will not let me move in with him. He said the money he will be getting from his friends will basically pay off his entire mortgage and that he would be stupid to say no. I've even asked if I can move in instead of one of these friends, and he still said no. That's not what I want, obviously. These people are strangers to me, but I was trying to find a compromise. He literally said to me, I don't want to live with these people, I'd much rather live with you, but I'd be stupid to say no to all that money even though I would be paying the same as one of them anyway. Whenever I try to talk to him about it, it just turns into an argument. He doesn't owe these people anything, no one has signed any contracts, he wouldn't be leaving them homeless. I would have to move back in with my parents, which just isn't a position I want to be in at my age. We plan on having kids in the near future and I just don't see how that will be possible now. Edit, he moved in with his friends. I decided to be the bigger person and drop over a housewarming gift. I arrived to find them effing some girl from all ends. I can tell when I'm not welcome. My fiancé wants me to get rid of my backup plan. I have always had a backup plan. My backup plan includes a place to live, money for general expenses and a rainy day fund. It's more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. I like having it and I have explained to previous partners that I have one and I let them decide if they're okay with it. My fiancé knew this before he started dating me exclusively. He knew that if we ever got married, I would require a prenuptial agreement and a request that this backup plan stays intact. A couple days ago, he told me he wasn't okay with this plan any longer. I don't think that's fair. He comes from a wealthy family and the prenuptial agreement protects him and I should have something that protects me. I'm actually finding myself really angry about this because I was an open book about this every step of the way and now I feel like Hess changed his mind. He says that having this plan makes it seem like I will leave him while I think it protects me. I'm annoyed because it's not fair to me to change your mind when you knew my expectations from the very beginning. I love him, but my dad is a divorce lawyer and from what I've heard and seen, better to protect yourself and not need it than no protection and then have to pick up the pieces. Both of our parents agree that a prenuptial is needed. I'm not getting rid of this plan. To clarify some things about my backup plan, I called it that because I started it at 25, I have had it for about 10 years now. I'm in my mid-30s. It is an emergency savings account, another savings account, and a property I own. I use my main job to pay for my household expenses with my fiancé and also to fill my main savings. I have a trust but also investments as well, but my dad helps me handle those. The emergency savings is only money from additional contract jobs I take on in my profession. The other savings account is only money from rental income, some of which I use to maintain the property and pay my dad back. The property is a multifamily home. And I rent out all the units but one. The property was bought by my dad when I was 24 and I have been paying him back the purchase price with no interest for a couple of years now. The property is worth a great amount now, but my dad would only accept what he paid for it from me. He took out a loan for me because he wanted me to be set up financially. In paying him back even though he already paid the loan off a long time ago. There's no way I would be able to buy that property now, or even 5 years ago, since house prices have skyrocketed where I live, and I'm grateful that my dad did that for me. I will finally pay off the loan in about 8 months and before I get married. It's taken me so long to pay my dad back because he insisted that I prioritize setting myself up financially rather than paying him back. The property is also a 15 minutes walk to the nearest hospital and close to the city center, so it is easy to rent out to medical students. I keep one unit open because of events. I make a killing when there are events or when big artists tour, and 2 examples are the recent Beyoncé and Taylor Swift tours where I made a lot on the days they were in my city. If there are no events where I think I can make a good amount, I rent it out to travel nurses in 3 to 4 month periods once or twice a year, but realistically, there could be a couple weeks or 2 to 3 continuous months during the year where it sits empty. Overall though, I make a substantial amount from this property. I can't take credit for this strategy because my dad is the one who helped me set up the apartments and manage it. My partner and I come from vastly different economic backgrounds. His family has generational wealth and he can't remember a time they didn't. I grew up firmly middle class, until my parents' divorce, and then it was a struggle for a while. His home life was relatively stable with a mom and dad. On the other hand, my dad tried his best, but my birth mom made my childhood tumultuous both emotionally and mentally. The difference with how we think about money became very noticeable when we were planning our wedding. We had been discussing what type of flowers we would like, and then I started talking about the budget and stated that I thought 30-40K was good overall to pay for a wedding and in an amount where we could easily afford it. He thought I meant 30-40K for flowers, and he and his parents didn't budget the amount and just said okay. I clarified what I meant, and I would never ever pay that amount for just flowers. When it comes to the plan, my fiancé knew about it as soon as we were exclusive. I don't agree with people saying I shouldn't have told him. To protect my assets in the prenuptial agreement, I had to. I also told him because I felt he deserved to know. As we got more serious, especially with marriage, I told him more after talking to my dad and finding out what was okay to say so that he understood the extent of the plan. The reason I kept saying the backup plan was complicated was due to the prenup my dad came up with. It is very long and protects me very well, and my fiancé was, in his view, not prepared for the extent of it. My dad and I went to this extent due to what he had seen people do in divorces, but also mainly due to his divorce that affected us both. It didn't help that I further joked that my dad tried to cover for any loopholes, including asking his associates to look over the document and revising it if one was found. What I saw as protection, my fiancé saw as me having an out since my dad went to such an extent. The short part of it is that my fiancé was insecure about it. He grew up with a dad as the breadwinner, and he was raised with this idea that he should be a provider, and my plan rattled him because it showed him that financially I didn't really need him. He told me he didn't realize how much of himself he had tied into this provider role and felt extremely insecure because he didn't know what he now brought to the relationship. When he found out about the sometimes empty unit, he felt more uneasy because he, even though I have and will always have a job, wanted and planned to take care of me. His idea of scrapping both prenups was his way of trying to say that he trusted me and that I should trust him. If he was willing to go without a prenup knowing I could get a substantial amount of his assets, then it would show me that he would never try to hurt me financially or otherwise. I told him I saw it at the time as extremely manipulative due to him doing it before we met with the lawyers, and he apologized because he honestly just panicked. There is not anything that would make me compromise about this. I told him he has a decision to make because I'm not changing my mind. My daughter-in-law insisted on not giving my son a present for Christmas but refused to admit it. So, I ruined Christmas and kicked her out of my house. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and 1 girl. I get along really well with 2 of their spouses. Patrick is a little different. He has always been asocial and introverted and could be cruel to his little sister, making fun of her and putting her and her interests down. His wife is the one I struggle with. I've tried to be as inviting, warm, and loving to her as the other spouses, but she's also mean to my daughter. She makes fun of her and even refers to daughter as a beard because daughter's spouse is effeminate. So, this year, when baking cookies with my daughter and Dill, my daughter-in-law told me not to get Patrick any gifts because he doesn't want any. He hates getting gifts. I've always known Patrick wasn't much for gifts, so we'd go very simple and practical, thinking of things we could upgrade for him, pots and pans, power tools, etc. But Dill was very insistent about it this year. He was always appreciative and admitted he could use them, but she insisted, so I didn't get Patrick anything. When we opened presents this year, everyone was laughing and having fun. We get to the end, and Dill turns and looks at me and says, "Where's Patrick's present?" I said, "You told me not to get him anything, remember?" She said, "No, I didn't." My daughter says, Yeah, you did. I was there." Dill laughs and says, "You guys must be off your meds again." My daughter and Amp, I both manage mental health issues, so this was an example of Dill's mean streak. I was so humiliated and upset by her little comment that I snapped. I told Dill and Patrick to leave and not to bother coming by again until Dill can learn how to be good. I also told Patrick that the way he allows her to trash the members of our family is just unacceptable. My daughter is on my side, but Christmas was awkward after that. My husband and other son told me that I overreacted, that it was just her sense of humor, and that I should be used to it by now. And used to what? Being disrespected and mocked in my own home? But I don't know if my actions were too over the top. I know I ruined Christmas for them, but what about me? What about my Christmas?
How did you feel when your child got married? It was a beautiful moment, even though I apologize in advance if my thoughts seem a bit scattered. Allow me to share some history. Shortly after my ex became pregnant, I found myself in a fight with my roommates. As a bouncer, I was a large man, and this fight scared my ex. Unfortunately, my roommates unalived her head with untrue stories, labeling me as abusive, a convicted felon, and even a murderer. Her strong religious beliefs, shared by her entire family, led her to believe them. They decided I was to have no involvement in our child's life. Our son became my youngest child, as I had 2 previous children from a previous marriage. I faithfully paid child support for 21 years, working tirelessly without any sick days or vacations. I juggled 2 full-time jobs and a part-time job for 18 years. The judge in domestic relations was renowned for being strict and holding men financially accountable. My fatherly obligation became solely financial, and nothing more. I paid more in child support than what I earned, as they could only legally take 15% of my paycheck. The rest was expected to be sent in, otherwise I would accumulate arrears and face imprisonment for contempt of court. When I argued that working so much prevented me from spending time with my kids, the judge held me in contempt. To make ends meet, I worked relentlessly, leaving me with only $300 every 2 weeks after paying child support. I didn't indulge in smoking, drinking, or any unnecessary expenses. There were times when I became homeless. I desperately tried to see my youngest son, but his mother told me he had Asperger's, just like me, and didn't want to see me. Deep down, I believed that change would be detrimental to him, as I struggle greatly with abrupt changes. So I never took her to court, as I simply couldn't afford it. Understandably, I was angry. Furthermore, my 2 older children want nothing to do with me, as their mother chose money and defaming my character. When I couldn't afford to give them presents, she falsely claimed that I didn't care about them. These relationships have suffered irreparable damage, and it pains me deeply. 3 years ago, my youngest son unexpectedly appeared at my door. He resembles me so much, and until that moment, I had never laid eyes on him. He had turned 18 and went against his mother's advice to find me. We spent time together, and I had the chance to meet his girlfriend. We bonded and had a wonderful time. My current wife was amazed at how kind and gentle I was, and she couldn't believe the negative things his family had said about me for years. A beautiful relationship blossomed between my youngest son and me. He is so much like me, but even better, unaffected by the scars of past experiences. Last night, he got married, and I was honored to be invited to the wedding. I attended to support my son and his lovely bride. However, I was seated far away, next to his wife's mother's best friend. Despite this, we had an incredible time together. Her entire family was warm and accepting of me. They showered my son with love, recognizing the person he truly is, unlike his own family. They saw the similarities between him and me, and shared stories about how my son and his wife praised and admired me. It was overwhelming. 21 years of struggle, anger, and hatred were suddenly worth it. I must admit, I still harbor intense feelings of hatred. I despise the fact that I lost the opportunity to be a father, and I resent the systems that failed not just me, but many others as well. It pains me that both mothers of my children chose money over everything else. I was never given a choice. I became a slave to financial obligations, pushing myself so hard that my health suffered. I despise the fact that I couldn't find a way out, and I hate the fact that I carry this hatred within me. The world dealt me blow after blow, and I didn't recover well. It hurts deeply that I lost two of my children. However, I am grateful for my youngest son, and I am determined to do everything I can to ensure that he doesn't end up like me. At least, in attending the wedding last night, I managed to make a group of terrible people incredibly uncomfortable. We thought making rape jokes was a red flag. Now we know why. I worked at Home Depot for a few years in my early 20s. My high school assistant principal came in with his two adult sons looking to buy a bunch of lumber. All three of them were very condescending and rude. They couldn't seem to grasp the fact that we were short-staffed and needed proper spotters to drive the heavy equipment through the store. When we were finally able to get the lumber out to their car, the older son said, "Thanks." My coworker gave them a smile and a nod. Apparently that didn't sit well with him, because he puffed out his chest and said, "I said, thank you, boy. When someone thanks you, you say you're welcome." AP smiled and said, "That's right." We walked inside, glad to be rid of them, only to find a barely 18-year-old cashier in tears. We asked her what was wrong and she told us that she overheard the father, my old assistant principal, saying, "If they insist on taking their sweet time, maybe we can take Blondie out back and pass her around." Nodding his head toward her when he emphasized Blondie. Bunch of fucking creeps. Well, about 3 months later my mother called me, saying her coworker died in a motorcycle accident, leaving behind a 2-year-old child. Later on, it was ruled a homicide. She was beaten to death with a baseball bat by her boyfriend, the father of her child. Him and his younger brother tried to cover it up by tossing her motorcycle and her dead body off the back of their pickup truck. The boyfriend was the older son of my high school assistant principal. He ended up taking the plea bargain and getting 5 years in prison. And full custody of the daughter was granted to his mother and father, the assistant principal and his wife.
What are you supposed to say after bang bang? If you enjoyed this, please leave a like down below and also hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to smash that bell so you get a notification. This magical encounter was brought to you by NordVPN. Hey you're finally awake. How would you rate today's experience? Would you recommend our services to your friends? How likely are you to do business with us again in the future? Give them a high five and then order them a taxi to Mexico. Now this is some exquisite game. If I wasn't just a voice.
My child-loving ex wants my thick butt back. I, 38, caught my ex-husband, 41, having an affair the week I found out I was pregnant. The blow was devastating. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Should I get a baby garbage procedure or should I stay with him for the sake of my baby? I decided to get a divorce and keep my baby. My ex-husband asked for a second chance, but it just wouldn't do, so he moved out and in with his affair partner, 25, within the month. I also started a new job with better pay but more flexibility. Now I'm becoming a single mother. Still, I had to work my butt off in the beginning to establish a good reputation before maternity leave. When I gave birth to my baby, I was back at work after 3 months. Being a single mom with a career was not an easy task. I hardly slept or ate for the entire first year. I lost all my baby weight and 15 kilos more, that's 30 pounds for you guys. My ex-husband and I have shared custody, but since she's still a baby, we are waiting with the every other week arrangement until she's 2. But he visits to see her 2 to 3 times a week. Mostly, my mom or the nanny receives him. I just can't bear seeing him so frequently, especially when he brings his affair partner, now fiancé, with him. The few times I met him he looked very oddly at me, asking if I had changed my hair or complimented my dress. Yesterday we had my baby's first birthday party. It was just the family and we held it at my ex-in-laws. With me, my ex, his fiancée, his sister, and my parents. My ex-husband was very irritated for some reason and just was there sulking the entire evening. After the cake, his mother asked him why he was acting as he did and he said nothing. When I asked him if he was okay he flew at me. He started yelling, telling me that I was the one who broke us. If I hadn't let myself go and taken care of myself half as much as I'm doing now nothing would have happened. Everyone was shocked and he stormed out in tears. I know what he said was a load of bull but it kept me thinking nonetheless. I have always been modest and rarely wore makeup. My style is a basic black t-shirt and jeans but I would never say that I let myself go. I do look different now and wear dresses and more feminine clothes occasionally, but I wasn't aware that I have started taking care of myself more. I just feel happy and at peace with myself now and maybe unconsciously trying to look nice because I want to start dating again. I feel guilty that he thought I was neglecting him. If I was, it was never intentional, and besides, even if I have started taking care of my appearance now, I couldn't look 13 years younger. Should I ignore him? He's staying in my life. I don't want any of these tantrums thrown at me in the future.
Vengeful folks of Reddit, what's the best way you've gotten revenge on someone? Sprayed a small amount of dilute ivy water, submerged poison ivy in water for a few days, in cheating ex's underwear drawer. Worked like a charm. She freaked out thinking she caught some sort of STD and lashed out violently at the guy she was cheating with for having given her an STD. I had a falling out with a guy at work, and then one day, his car broke down halfway between Austin and Temple. After they contacted everyone else they knew, he sent a mutual friend to ask me for help. I spent most of a Sunday morning getting his car back to Temple. He couldn't even look at me the next day. Befriended all her kids' friends' parents. I'm at every party, every event, every dinner. Great relationships with her kids. They give her crap for the breakup to this day. Kids are adults now. I wonder why she couldn't ever make it to any parties.
What's the darkest secret someone has kept from you? I had a friend that came back from Afghanistan with pretty bad PTSD. He became a heavy drinker and would often get blackout intoxicated. In 2010 he tried to end his life, but his longtime girlfriend found him and managed to stop the bleeding enough to save him. I got a call that he did it. He ended his life after a bonfire party where everyone was drinking. His girlfriend heard a shot and found him bleeding out in the bathroom. He shot himself in the stomach. I had always thought it was strange that he chose the stomach since he was a trained soldier, but assumed maybe it was the alcohol or the nerves. He was still conscious when paramedics arrived and he told them point blank he was tired of living in constant pain and just wanted it over. He pleaded with the medics to just let him die. His girlfriend ended her own life. She'd been distraught and distant ever since he died, and she just never really recovered. Went from being a beautiful young woman to a rail-thin substance user and then swallowed a bottle of medication. She left a 16-page letter for her friends and family. It detailed how she had ended her boyfriend's life that night. He'd apparently been begging her to do a life-ending pact, but she didn't want to die that night. He got in a drunken rage and they were fighting the whole night. He grabbed his firearm and locked himself in the bathroom, threatening to do it. She talked him into letting her in by saying she was ready to die as well. She claims she went in there hoping to talk him down yet again, but something about the look in his eyes changed her mind. He was the love of her life and she just snapped. She couldn't watch him suffer any longer. She took the firearm from his shaking hands and aimed at his chest. Her nerves and unfamiliarity with it caused her to lower her aim right as she pulled the trigger and ended up hitting low. She stated that he asked her to shoot again to finish, but she dropped the firearm and was crying uncontrollably. It was at this moment that he realized she wasn't ready to go, so he picked it up and calmly asked her for a hand towel. She wrote that he wiped the grip of its fingerprints and then placed it in his hand and told her to walk away so you don't have to see this. She was frozen in place as he pointed at his head and pulled the trigger, but it was empty. He'd only loaded a single round. She watched him bleed out over the next couple of minutes. My girlfriend and I got into a fight regarding the topic of rope and she is threatening to leave me. A couple of days ago, my girlfriend was reading some feminist articles. The article said, any man that has intimacy with a woman who has been drinking should be charged with rope. My girlfriend asked me what I thought of that and I said I don't think it's that simple and you can't just automatically say that any man who has intimacy with a woman who has been drinking is a rapist. That's absolutely ridiculous. There are too many variables to consider to make such a broad statement. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, her whole demeanor changed, and her response was dripping in condescension. Really, what other information would you need? It seems pretty clear to me. I told her that if she considered that to be clear, I'm a little worried about her sense of free thinking. For instance, the most obvious question, what if they're both intoxicated? How much does she need to have had before he becomes a rapist? What about if the situation was reversed and it was the man that had been drinking? Would that make her a rapist? What if she was the one to initiate the intimacy? These are all relevant questions to be answered. This is info I would expect to know before just saying a man is a rapist if he sleeps with an intoxicated woman. At that point my girlfriend became visibly angry. Her response was, if the woman has been drinking and she has even a buzz, the man is a rapist. If they're both drinking, the man is still a rapist. If she initiated the intimacy, the man is still a rapist. Then in the reverse situation the woman is the rapist? I asked. She laughed with a condescension that made my blood boil and she said, don't be stupid. The only way a woman could rope a man is if she had a gun or something and put something up his back door. If he gets a stiffy, it's not rope. I was and still am floored by her hypocrisy and ignorance. Needless to say, this argument escalated further than it should have to the point that we were actually yelling at each other. Finally, I had to just walk away. I went for a walk and when I got back, she was sitting on the couch. Without even looking at me, she said if I don't change my way of thinking immediately, she's moving out. To which I responded, I would offer to help you pack, but you don't need a man's help with that. And I went to bed. We didn't speak to each other for 2 days and had been walking around the house, ignoring each other. But yesterday morning she said to me, you know, you were a rapist because we had intimacy the night of my best friend's wedding. We were both hammered at the wedding. We went back to our hotel room, and she initiated some of the wildest intimacy we ever had. But that last statement was the last straw for me. I told her I would not ask her to change what she thinks the way she demanded I do, but if she really felt I did that to her, then we are done, and she needs to move out. Then today, she went to work. She sent me an email that says, I would never call the police on you because I know you never intended to rope me and I completely forgive you. I'd even be willing to forget everything that has happened. All I ask is that you simply acknowledge that you did that to me and that men who have intimacy with intoxicated women are rapists. That's all I'm asking. I did not, nor will I respond to that. Later on, I received another email from my girlfriend. In it she said, after talking to my mom and my sister, they both told me I should be ashamed of myself for even thinking that you had did that to me, and I've given it some thought. and I no longer think that. I'm sorry for saying that. I know you would never do that to me. I gave some thought to it and this time I did respond. I said, thank you for the apology, and your apology is accepted. Unfortunately, I still can't continue in the relationship. I'm relieved that you no longer feel that way, but it was because your mom and sister told you it was wrong. That doesn't take away from the fact you did believe it, and if they had not said what they said or even if they agreed with you, you would still feel that way, and that is something I cannot rectify in my heart. I feel as though you are a stranger to me and not a stranger I have any desire to get to know. Sometimes what you say cannot be fixed with I'm sorry. This is one of those times. I wish nothing but the best for you and I hope you find someone that will make you happy. I can't be that person. She has not responded. My girlfriend and I got into a fight regarding the topic of rope and she is threatening to leave me. My now ex-girlfriend was calling me constantly over the next week. It was bordering on harassment. She would apologize over and over and say that she loved me and no longer felt like I decided to rope her and she just wanted to be with me again. I told her no repeatedly. At one point I told my 20-year daughter, not from the ex, everything about the breakup and what she said about me roping her at the wedding. My daughter and I have a super close bond and tell each other everything. So, after telling my daughter all about it, she became so angry that she called my ex. She offered to arrange my ex's face for cheaper than a plastic surgeon would and also to remove any teeth to prevent any toothaches she may get in the future. So my kid and I were sitting on my couch having a couple beers and chatting when the cops knocked on my door. The ex called them and reported my daughter for threatening her. They charged her with a misdemeanor for the threats but they didn't arrest her or put her in jail. Needless to say she wanted to make a visit to my ex after that, but I was able to talk a little sense into her. Later that same night I got another call from my ex with more of the crying and the I'm sorries and she wanted to just forget everything that has happened and she no longer feels like I did rope her and she just wanted us to be together again. She asked if she could come over to talk and she alluded to us having intimacy, I guess thinking I am just a dumb man and the offer of intimacy would have me forget that she accused me of rope and tried to have my daughter arrested. I told the ex that I was not interested in talking nor was I ever going to be sticking my pee in crazy again. I asked her to please stop calling me and just let me live my life in peace. I hoped that would be the end of it, but as we all know, hope springs eternal but was not to be my luck. At about 3 a.m. I awoke to something that normally I quite enjoyed waking up to, but this night I was not pleased. She had broken into my flat, and knowing that I always sleep unclothed, she came into my room and was giving me neck. Like I said, normally that would have been awesome but this time I was infuriated. I started screaming at her to get the F out of my house before I called the cops on her like she did my daughter. She started crying and begging me to please talk to her. I'm ashamed to say, I did grab her by the arm and walk her out of my room to the front door only to find some friend of hers sitting on my couch. I guess her car was not running so she got a ride from this friend. So now I'm standing in my living room, unclothed, yelling for them to get the F out of my house. Which woke up my daughter, who was sleeping in the spare room because she had too much booze and I didn't want her driving. My daughter came out of the room with a baseball bat because she didn't know who I was yelling at and she thought we were getting robbed. When she saw who I was yelling at she actually tried going after the ex and her friend but I was able to stop her and get her to go into the bedroom. I ordered my ex to get the F out and told her I better never hear from her again. Next morning I have off from work so my daughter and I are eating breakfast and talking about going to get new locks for my house later when I get a knock at my door. My daughter answered it and lo and behold it was two detectives. My ex apparently was now trying to have me arrested for roping her. I couldn't believe it. Well, I guess I could believe it, but it was still a shock nonetheless. They said that she had called and told them she wanted to report me that I decided to rope her, and that it was regarding an incident in a hotel room after attending a wedding and they were there to ask me some questions. Now believe me when I tell you that I'm not a man that just readily cries in front of people. Much less total strangers. But for some reason that I couldn't explain, I just started crying. I wasn't bawling like a little girl or anything but there were for sure tears in my eyes, and I was unable to hold them back. Being about as embarrassed and ashamed as a man can be, I excused myself to the bathroom. I pulled myself together and washed my face. I gave myself a stern talking to about crying like a wuss in front of total strangers. And I started heading back out to the living room. I got as far as the hallway when I heard my daughter, half yelling, obviously crying herself, telling the detectives basically what a beach my ex is and that I didn't rope her, that we were just intoxicated and had intimacy and it was my ex that initiated it in the first place. I walked back into the living room, tears and blubbering behind me and told my kid that I would handle my business from here and to please excuse herself to the bedroom. Once she had left the room the female detective asked me if that was really what had happened and I told her it was. They thanked me for my time and they left. A few hours later my phone rings and it is the same female detective. She told me that they went to my ex's and asked her to go further into detail about what happened. They asked her were we both drinking, and she admitted that we were. They asked her if I used force to get my way, and surprisingly she told them no, that she was in fact the one who initiated the intimacy. The detective then asked her if she was the one that initiated it, then how exactly was it that she was feeling like I was the one to rope her. She said that she was intoxicated and a woman cannot give permission to intimacy while she is intoxicated, so if a man has intimacy with her then that is rope. The detective said she had to keep herself from laughing out loud. She then told my ex that she didn't know where she was getting her info from, but she explained that it is illegal for somebody to have intimacy with another person if that person is so intoxicated that they are unconscious. She said that what happened between her and I was nothing more than two people having intoxicated sex. The detective said since she was the one initiating, the only person who could be roped the other, was my ex and not me. Then the detective said my ex got huffy and asked her how could she possibly have been the one committing rope since not only was I the man, but I had a stiffy. The detective told her that she wasn't sure where my ex was getting her information from, but that she was wrong in everything that she was saying and that she should be a little more careful about making police reports and spouting off what essentially equates to nonsense because she could have done some serious damage to somebody else's life under the right circumstances. I cannot tell you how wonderful it was to hear all that stuff that this detective was telling me. I really wish I could have been there to see my ex's face when she was informed of all this, although I know that is just childish and petty on my part. Then the detective said something else that I was not expecting. She told me that my daughter had told her about the night before when I woke up to the ex giving me neck. She asked me if it was true and I said yes. The detective told me that if I wanted to, I could report that as ASA and she would be arrested. They would probably just release her on her own recognizance, but she would still have to go to court and if found guilty she would have to register as an offender. I couldn't believe it. I really thought about it, but I have no desire to ruin my ex's life. I just want her out of mine. But you can bet I had fun telling my ex what the detective told me and I used it to tell my ex if she ever contacts me again that I would do it. And also, she needed to have the charges on my kid dropped. But if she did that, had the charges dropped and then never contacted me again, I would not report her. She agreed. And I can't be happier. When did you realize that one of your family members was a horrible person? When my dad told me that at 15, I'd be a drug-addicted, pregnant, high school dropout. My dad was a real piece of work. There are 5 of us kids in the family. 3 girls, 2 boys. The boys were spoiled rotten, courtesy of my dad, while the girls were treated like dirt. Like we didn't have any intelligence whatsoever, by the same person. My mom just went along with it, cause hey, he was quite a catch. Anytime my sisters or I would tell my dad something, even if it was something trivial, he wouldn't believe us, called us liars, etc. If my brothers were to tell him the same thing. He'd believe them, no hesitation. Then when we would tell him that we had already said that. Nope. We never said that. Quit lying. At 15. He told me out of the blue that I would never graduate from high school, that I would end up knocked up and addicted to drugs. At this time I was an A student, never touched drugs and was still a virgin. He said this because I had already passed the grade that he himself dropped out of high school at. And my older brother had dropped out of high school that same year. Yay, a great thing to say to your daughter. I graduated high school, the first kid to do so. Never touched drugs, the only kid that didn't start using. Waited till after high school to lose my virginity, the 4th one since my youngest brother was like 9 at the time. And do you want to know what I did? My mom ended up bribing him to go to my graduation. So I took my diploma and shoved it in his face, told him he lost, flipped him off then walked away. He's in prison now for some stupid shit. Both my brothers are following in his footsteps. No HS education, no work experience, treats women like crap, etc. I'm doing just fine. What was the most embarrassing intimate experience of your life? I was just recently divorced and just turned 21. I was invited to a house party with a bunch of friends and I was getting absolutely drunk. When I say drunk I mean 10 beers deep and 6 shots later I find myself talking to this girl. At some point we end up in a room and we take a couple more shots. We start making out and removing clothes. Through all the booze I get hard enough to slide it in. We are in the doggy position and I feel like I am on the top of the world for about 3 minutes. Then it happened. The room began to spin and I started to needing to brace myself a little more. I burp and get a mouthful of vomit. I gulp it back and keep going. Then I burp again and there was no stopping it this time. I tossed my cookies and about $40 worth of booze on her back. I am still trying to go. It took her a minute to figure out what just happened. She begins to scream and a bunch of people run in and flip on the lights. At this moment I realize how much I puked. It was everywhere. In her hair, on her back and legs, the bed, floor and on a lamp next to the bed. She now sees she is covered and she begins to throw up. Meanwhile, 3 or 4 people are dying of laughter and one is trying to help clean her up. I am standing there with puke on my chest, still naked with my arms up in the air like I just want to fight against a bear. More people walking in the room and applauding me and giving me high fives. It was like the puke Olympics and I got the gold. After everything calmed down and she wasn't raging anymore, she looks back at me and I respond, "Call me tomorrow?" That was the end of my night for obvious reasons. She never called me again. My son and his friend are a couple. How do I let them know it's okay? My boy is 20 years old. He's absolutely my pride and joy, and there is nothing he could do that would ever make me love him less. For the first half of his life, I, regrettably, wasn't involved very much. His mother and I parted ways when he was just a few months old, and at the time, I was struggling with a heroin addiction and was absolutely not as present in his life as I should have been. Nor was I suited to fatherhood at all. I saw him at most. I won't discuss details because that's his private story to tell, but when he was 12, he revealed to me that he was being badly mistreated at the hands of his mother and her boyfriend. Despite not being the best father at the time, I didn't want my boy suffering anymore, so I got myself cleaned up and sorted out in order to get full custody of him. I've effectively been a single and sober father ever since, and he has little to no contact with his mother. He's everything a man could want his son to be. He's uniquely kind and fiercely loyal. He's unflinchingly brave. He's incredibly generous. And despite the horrors he suffered as a child, he's unfailingly positive and sunny to the last. Somehow, I of all people was bestowed with the honor of watching him grow from a sweet young boy to the greatest man I have ever known. I cannot stress enough my pride in him. When he was 18 he got accepted into a top-ranking university on the other side of the country. I was sad to see him go, but simultaneously overjoyed that he got into his first choice and was starting a new chapter in his life. He comes home once every other month, and on the months he doesn't come home I go to visit him. He's doing well in uni, has made lots of friends and seems incredibly happy there, which I'm obviously chuffed about. Since his second year he's lived with his friend in a flat off campus. I've strongly suspected since his early teens that my son is gay, and I know more or less confirmation that this is true and that his friend is actually his boyfriend. So for this pandemic faff, my son decided he'd rather come home and quarantine at mine than stay at his uni flat. His friend, however, would be left alone if my son came back as he's a Condian and his family are back over there and I gather he doesn't have the best relationship with him anyway. He asked if it would be okay. A friend tagged along to my house and I said of course, no problem. They've been back at mine for about 6 weeks. Now they think they're being subtle, I know, but I've caught them doing a couple of things on several occasions. Now the friend has slipped up a couple of times and called my son babe and sweetie in front of me, which I pretended not to notice for the sake of saving embarrassment. There have been nights where we'll be watching a film with the lights off and thinking, I can't see. My son will have his arm around the friend. One day I walked into the lounge and I'm positive they'd just been kissing and were trying to cover it, though I admit I have no confirmation on that one. The most solid evidence, however, came a few mornings ago. I get up very early to go for runs in the morning, hence why I'm making a Reddit post at 5 in the morning. As far as I was told, my son was sleeping in his childhood room and his friend was in the guest room. I don't know what possessed me to do so, but on Tuesday morning, I cracked my son's door open to check on him like I used to when he was a kid. Lo and behold, they're both asleep, snuggled up together in my son's bed. That more or less solidified for me that they're together. I didn't say anything, just shut the door and went for my run. And I haven't mentioned it to them yet. What I want advice on is this: how do I let my son and his boyfriend know that I'm okay with them being a couple and they don't have to feel like they have to sneak around in my house? I want them to be comfortable here, and I want them to know I support them both no matter what. Or is that not a good idea? Am I better off leaving it alone and waiting until they tell me themselves? If they ever do, I obviously don't want to force either of them out of the closet, but at the same time, I hate feeling as if they feel like they're being forced into the closet in my house. What's my best course of action here? What is a lesson you learned the hard way, which almost got you unalived? This was about 18 years ago. I take a seat on the bench and I have my music drink and bag. And in walks this Mexican girl, let's call her Shelly. We talk a bit, and she one of those girls where you flirt back and forth and nothing happens, but is just something that possibly is there. I see that today she is in a really pissed off mood, so I ask her, what's wrong? And she says, just having a bad day. I reply, anything I can help you with? She says, you're not gonna believe this, but this Edgar outside just said he was gonna beat the shit out of me, for no reason. I asked. She responded, he said he was gonna kick the shit out of me, so I say you have had to have done so. She cuts me off and says no, so I say let's effing go outside and talk to this mother effer. So she says no, I don't want to get you involved in my shit. That's just unacceptable for any guy to say that he would kick the shit out of a girl. Have you ever met this guy or ever seen him before? She goes, no, I've never seen him in my life. I say for the second time, let's go straighten this motherfucker out. That's unacceptable, but she again affirms that she doesn't want any problems and it's not necessary. I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely shocked. Around 10 minutes later I see Zane Frazier. He was one of the top guys in MMA at that time and one of the first UFC fighters. He was a big mother effer, 6'4", and 240 pounds. He was pretty well known as someone you wouldn't F with. Long story short, I found out he was the guy saying that he was gonna F up that chick's ass. I was even more shocked. So what happened was, one time I went up to him and I said, Zane, I just gotta ask you a effing question. It's bothering me. He said, yeah, sure. What happened a couple of weeks ago, with you and a little Mexican girl? He replied, oh my god, Rich, you have no effing idea. She backed up and hit my car, and so when I got out of my car to go check what happened, she didn't get out of her car, so I tapped on her window and she goes, get the fuck away from me, you effing Edgar. And that's exactly what she said. All I wanted was the insurance info on that car, and I lost it. If that was a man, I would have killed that guy. I lost my mind, and so I go, that doesn't make any sense. And so he told me in private he was gonna have his wife, also an MMA star, come down here and beat her up, because he would never hit a girl, but that was the closest he ever came to almost doing it. The craziness to this story was I was getting ready to go outside and put up hands with this guy for a chick I didn't even know, who was lying through her teeth and deserved to get the shit kicked out of her. The moral of the story: mind your own business because you don't know the whole story.
My unhinged sister wants to take my parents' hidden $75,000 savings for me and other siblings and use it for her wedding. She banned me from her wedding because I exposed her to her mother-in-law. Since the proposal, Ella has gone into full bridezilla mode. At the behest of my mom, Ella made me a bridesmaid. So I'm roped into all the BS, and so far these are the demands my dear sister has made. To say a few, all bridesmaids are to pay for their $300 dress, shoes, hair, and makeup. There's also a bachelorette spa day, $800 each, that bridesmaids have to pay to ensure our hair and skin are flawless for pictures. We are also have to pay for the bachelorette vacation weekend to Toronto and stay at the Fairmont Hotel, $1,000 weekend. Then we all need to pay $25 for cake and food tasting. But here is the craziest part: all the guests and the bridal and groom party need to pay $150 to reserve their spots. And gifts have to be either cash, check, or from the list of registry items. She has a spreadsheet of what everyone is gifting, and has said she will return items that aren't from her registry or match her theme. My mom says it's bride anxiety. I say it's just my sister trying to control everything because she wants a December wedding on a ski hill. But over the last weekend, this whole wedding turns for the worst for me, as I've learned what my sister did through group chat. I did not know that my parents had been setting up $25,000 accounts for myself and each of my siblings. The rule was that these accounts could be used for anything once we turned 19 and went off to post-secondary. It was our money to use. Right after sister got engaged, she apparently had a conversation with my mom, who has PPD, about how she always felt like the child left out and guilt-tripped mom. As a result of a very long conversation, my mom figured that she could divert some of the funds from all the kids' accounts to pay for sister's wedding. For those wondering, my 2 older brothers are in the military. They aren't married yet and live on base. They never used their $25,000 because the Army in Canada pays for your education and housing. So my mom had $25,000 at her disposal. Then combined with my sisters and my $25,000, it would have been $100,000. Sister did this because, again, she is a master manipulator and a narcissist. She used some of my mom's mental and physical health conditions against her. But I can't possibly accept this. I asked my mom and dad to please finally have the convo with me. I told them how I felt, how much of a financial toll it would be on me, and how it wasn't fair. Well, Dad blew up. He didn't know about the $100,000, or the things sisters was doing. He didn't like the fact that Mom used a lot of your father and I agree talk even though they hadn't. We worked through the wedding issue and the $25,000. Dad assured me I would get my money, and I wouldn't have to go to wedding if I didn't want to. Then he immediately called my sister and told her to come here ASAP because he needed to talk to her and would not accept excuses. She said she would be here in 4 hours because she was with fiancé and his parents. Dad pressed, she hung up and blocked him. She came after 5 hours, and while mother-in-law was there, she was sweet as pie. We talked to sister's mother-in-law when she dropped sister off. Sister doesn't drive, and mother-in-law was shocked that sister had done that. There is apparently a money dance, but no $150 fee. But when mother-in-law left, oh Lord, the gates to hell broke loose. She demanded why Dad disturbed the peaceful evening and demanded he drive her back. But Dad said he didn't care and to sit down. There was a lot of angry yelling back and forth and a lot of manipulation from sister, including threats of no contact or no seeing possible grandkids in the future. She was trying to get Mom to going back to the original 100K plan, but Mom and Dad weren't budging. Soon-to-be brother-in-law and his family aren't paying for poop apparently, so now they have to, or sister doesn't get to have her ski hill wedding. Sister eventually got an Uber and left because she was being attacked. After that day, my parents told sister's in-laws that for such a wedding to happen, everyone would need to contribute. Her in-laws agreed that $100,000 for a wedding is insane. Last I heard, sister will get her $15,000 for the wedding, which is basically $5,000 because of the $10,000 dress, since it's already ordered, and then her in-laws are being generous and helping with $15,000. Now, Ella absolutely hates me. She blamed me for everything and said that I had caused irreparable damage to her relationship with her fiancé and in-laws. Because of this, she's banned me from the wedding and from her life. I honestly don't care. I don't really see it as losing a sister, I see it as losing a bully.
Redditors with real-life butterfly effect stories. What happened and what was the series of events and outcomes? I was very little and singing a song completely with made-up words. My mom asked what it was, and I said Evelynese. My name is Evelyn. Then a year later I made up a fake country for that fake language, Evelynese. Then I started making up some stories. Now it's a little over a decade later, I'm in high school, and I have a whole fictional world with 3 political superpowers, that I won't name for personal reasons. But just know Evelynese has a better name now. This world has a very intricate map of ecosystems, and soon, political borders of various eras, 5 distinct cultural and ethnic groups so far, and some unique flora and fauna. Former Evelynese specifically has 20 families of nobility, 237 common families, a religion, a specific type of domesticated big cat, the bones of a con long. 2 epics in the works, the first being adapted from older stories I made up, and much more. I'm probably going to work on this until the day I die. All because toddler me wanted to throw some snark at my mom.
What is the dumbest thing you have tricked someone into believing? About a year ago, I was taking off the remnants of a peel-off mask I put a little bit on my shoulders. My boyfriend walked in and asked me what I was doing, and for some reason I joked and said, "Oh, I'm shedding my skin since I just finished my period." He was really confused, but believed me immediately and started asking a ton of questions. I decided it would be funny to stick with the joke and answer all the questions. Here's how it went. "So why do you have to do that?" "Well, you know how girls shed the lining of their womanhood during their periods? It's kind of the same thing, but since skin doesn't contract, we have to peel it off." "Does it hurt?" "Only a little bit, but it's such a relief when it's off." "Do all girls have this?" "Yes. But we're all kind of ashamed of it because a lot of guys shame us for it. So don't ask girls around you about it." My poor gullible baby boy. Well, once, he mentioned it to one of my best girlfriends. I gave her a look from across the room, and she went with it. And then he mentioned it in front of his sister. I gave her a look, she went with it, and then told their mom to go along with it later if he ever asked. This spread around quickly. His aunt, my mother, my sisters, my female cousins, his female cousins, his grandmother, all of my female friends, all of his sister's female friends, everyone. While all of this happened, his male friends found out about it. One of them asked their moms, and she laughed at him and didn't say anything. So he believes it. The others still believe it without question. This had spread like a wildfire that I could not control. At this point, I had completely forgotten about the joke, but earlier today, I was sitting at the dinner table with him and his family just chatting, and I was scratching my shoulder because I got a really bad sunburn and it was starting to peel. He asked me if my sunburn was bothering me and if I wanted some aloe vera, so I said yes. He said to me in front of the entire table, "It must suck that your sunburn is peeling and you have to peel this time of the month again." It took everything in me to not burst out laughing, but it took absolutely nothing for his mother to snort water out of her nose and proceed to cry laugh at the dinner table. His sister buried her face in her hands and laughed so hard that her face turned bright red and she snorted over and over again. Much to my surprise, I did not laugh, but I felt myself convulse and my face got so hot. He was really confused, but his dad was even more confused. He asked him what he was talking about, and my poor boyfriend, who was so confused as to why his sister and mom were laughing, said, "Well, you know, when girls have that time, they have to peel, right?" And his dad just looked at all three of us dumbfounded and said, "What the hell have you been telling this boy?" And we all lost it. I started laughing so hard that I thought I was going to throw up. I was crying, I was in pain, I probably burst a couple blood vessels from laughing so hard. I finally fessed up because I couldn't explain my maniacal laughter anymore. He looked at me like I just shot his dog. I told him I was so sorry and explained the origin of this running joke. He sat back down at the table absolutely dumbfounded. After dinner we went back to his room and he asked me, "Everyone has been lying to me about this and you started it." I felt so bad, and I was apologizing profusely. He was silent for about a minute before he started laughing harder than I have ever heard him laugh before. He had tears rolling down his cheeks, his face was bright red, and he kept grabbing his stomach and heaving from how hard he was laughing. He told me between heaves that he couldn't believe that I had gotten every single woman in his life to convince him that this complete BS was real, and that he wouldn't believe periods were real at this point if he hadn't. Witness me curled up in the bathroom sobbing from cramps.
My fiancé failed the orange peel test when I asked him to pour me a drink and he had a hissy fit. I, 20, and my fiancé, 30, were enjoying a Friday night wind down. Had dinner, and yogurt, and were sitting down for TV. I decided to paint my nails pink as we're going out tomorrow and seeing my family. They haven't seen us since we got engaged last month. I'm in a good mood and feeling happy. After painting one hand, I ask him if he fancies opening a bottle of Prosecco tonight, well stocked post-engagement. He says yes. I ask him if he could bring me a glass too, please. That's where the argument began. No shouting, stomping, etc., just speaking our minds and then silence before resuming. Generally, we get along great and have very healthy communication. Hell, we managed to compromise on a child-free wedding easier than this. He wanted children there, I didn't. We settled on child-free ceremony and kids for the dinner and reception. Back to the argument. His perspective: it's weird of me to ask him to bring me things, be it a beverage or a blanket. That I'm a grown woman and should do these sorts of things for myself. Doing it for me would be simping, and asking him to is toxic. My perspective: it's a glass of Prosecco and my nails were drying. My love language is acts of service and I make him at least 3 cups of tea a week. A simple refusal is fine. His attitude about me asking was, in my opinion, toxic. Earlier on in our relationship I did ask him to get me glasses of water semi-regularly. We had a discussion and he expressed his frustration. I now don't really ask, maybe once a week at most. The last time was in a cafe. For unnecessary context, if you're interested, I wonder if it's how we grew up. He's an only child and claims his mom never asked him to do anything like this for her. He's fiercely independent and can sometimes exist in his own little world. Whereas, I have an older sister and we just did as we were told, really. Definitely learned to play. Host at family gatherings, offering food and drink and just being pleasant. If someone asked for something, like a drink, and you said no, that'd be considered rude. But I digress. I asked for Prosecco, even though my 5 feet 0 inches legs do in fact work. Am I the a-hole? My racist husband thinks I cheated because my baby is black. My soon-to-be ex-husband Eric and I were high school sweethearts, and we grew up in a small town where the majority of the population was white. Eric is white, and while I am not a typical-looking white woman, I have enough features that I could be considered white passing. I recently discovered I am mixed race. Eric and I got married after I graduated high school. I became pregnant shortly after and had fraternal twins, Idge and Natalie. As the twins got older, Idge started to look like Eric, blonde hair albeit curly and fair skin, and Natalie started to look like me, dark wavy hair, but her skin would get darker like she had a permanent tan. Eric and I were confused by this because no one in our families had a skin complexion like this. Eric became a cop after college. When the kids were 7, Eric got a chance for a promotion which moved us to the city. I started to notice that Eric would make prejudicial comments against certain communities of people that I would shrug off because they were not overtly offensive. One of Eric's co-workers noticed a picture of Idge and Natalie and asked if Natalie was adopted as she had African-American features, and suggested that I might have had an affair after conceiving with Eric, as it was possible that twins could be fathered by 2 different men. This planted a seed of doubt. By the time the twins were 11, Eric couldn't hold his doubt anymore and demanded a paternity test. He explained his doubt, so I obliged. The test came back as Eric being Natalie's father, but he would act distant towards Natalie. One day, I was using Eric's phone because mine died to look for a recipe for dinner and came across a support forum where Eric was convinced I slept with a black man. He was making awful comments about black people, and that I somehow altered the DNA test results. I was furious and confronted Eric. He said there was no way Natalie could be his and demanded another DNA test. I agreed to prove him wrong, and once the test came back, we contacted my parents because I was genuinely confused about where Natalie's features came from because my parents were white. After dancing around the topic, my mom confessed that my dad was not my real dad, and my real dad was biracial. After looking at an old picture, my dad looked white at first glance, but the longer you looked at him, the more you could see his African American side. I happened to not inherit those genes. This seemed to appease Eric, but I could not forget the comments Eric made about black people and told him I wanted a divorce. He apologized and said he couldn't understand at the time, but I told him it was disgusting that was what he thought about that community, and I refused to raise my children in an environment that fostered and normalized negative thoughts about any community. Eric and my parents tried to get me to rethink my decision and to go to counseling. I agreed to go to counseling, but I am not changing my mind about divorcing him. He's flat out racist and I do not condone that kind of thing.
My neglectful mother told me she hated men and that's why she hates me. I, male, have a twin sister, and if I'm being honest, our mom has always preferred. She's always far quicker to give her hugs and compliments, and she seems a bit more emotionally distant to me. Every time I've tried to get her sweet presents or hugs, she always shrugs away from me. However, whenever my sister does so much as smile, she literally lights up. I've noticed it my whole life and I've tried not to let it bother me, but things finally came to a head recently. Long story short, we've been looking at colleges and I was upset because it seemed like she wanted my sister to stay local more than she wanted me to. I snapped and yelled that she loved my sister more than me our whole lives and she didn't give a crap about me, and I'm still not sure why. Today she came into my room and asked if we could talk, and she said there was something she felt it was time to tell me. Then she opened up about her childhood, something she's never done, and explained that her father abused her intimately and she had brothers who abused her too, and it instilled a deep disdain towards men in her. She told me she's been meaning to go to therapy and get help, but she told me it breaks her heart that she ever made me feel like she loved me less than my sister, and she's been trying my whole life to get the hell over it and grow up, and that it breaks her heart that I haven't had the mom I deserve. She started crying and I hugged her and told her I loved her and she was a great mom and I was lucky to have her. Afterwards, I suggested we go out to dinner, just the two of us, and I could pay, and she said she'd take me up on that under the condition she'd pay. So we had a really nice dinner and we talked, and I felt I connected with her in a way I hadn't before. I can't really explain it, but I felt like I saw her and she saw me in a different, but good, way. Overall. Gonna be honest, I feel terrible because I feel like I made her trauma all about me. She's a wonderful person and I don't know why I'd accuse her of not loving me like she loves my sister. All I know is that I'm gonna be better to her and understand she's doing her best, as we all are.
My teacher saved my life and she has no idea. There are Miss K's across the country that many students don't get to meet, all because our teachers are underpaid. Back in high school I met my AP US history teacher Miss K. Miss K was an odd person. She ate lunch alone at her desk and ate cherry tomatoes only. She was quiet and timid outside our classroom, but inside she was a live wire whose spark we all felt. I mean, I never met a person more passionate about teaching. She absolutely loved her job and it showed in every aspect of our education. In my home life at the time, my younger sister was battling cancer. For a couple years she was in remission, but it came back and it came back hard. She needed intense chemo and I'd spend my days after school at the hospital sipping Jello and nasty grape juice with her. Oftentimes I'd skip school and wouldn't tell my parents. It got so bad I received a court letter to my home saying that my parents needed to make an appearance due to my absences. I felt guilty to my stomach. I didn't know who to cry to. Not to my parents because they were dealing with a lot, not my sister, so I went to the only person I thought could help me, Miss K. After class I spoke with her. She asked why I kept skipping class if I supposedly love her class so much. I told her, while I do, my sister is battling cancer all alone because my parents are constantly working, I feel guilty being here. In school. Living a normal life my sister might not have. I was scared that if I was here, my other half would pass away alone out there wondering what her big sister's doing. Miss K flicked my forehead. She flicked my forehead. I looked at her dead in the eye wondering what could have proposed that. Waiting for an answer, she got out of her seat and gave me a hug. Life goes on, sweetie. No matter what you do, the time in life is always going to pass. I've been in your position before and trust me, the self-loathing isn't worth it in a time like this. You're going to miss the smell of a hospital, the beeps of the monitor, the sound of a classroom, the look of the boy, or whoever, you're crushing on from across the room. You're going to wish you didn't spend so much time in your head and not out here. Just keep going. Cut my class if you need to, I'll work something out, but always understand that something as precious as life is always out of your hands. I started crying right then and there. To this day I've never heard someone speak so profoundly. It wasn't her job to help me, she wasn't getting paid for this. She did this all out of the kindness of her heart because she should. When my sister passed away on my graduation day, I dedicated my valedictorian speech to her and Miss K. I don't know if my sister heard it all during the live stream or if Miss K heard it from heaven above, but I know in my heart, not my head, that they listened and know the impact they left on me. Share this to a Miss K in your life, and for the love of God appreciate and pay our teachers.
Am I the jerk for telling my sister I would say I told you so if she gets cancer? I, 27 female, really enjoy motocross, and although I'm an amateur I spend a lot of my time and money on it. My sister, 31 female, has always kinda despised the sport. She is always saying that it's dangerous and that I shouldn't be doing it because I will get hurt. 3 weeks ago I fell on a jump and broke my ankle and shattered my knee. I am still unsure what kind of recovery I will make, and I was, and still kinda am, mentally in a bad place as well. Like I said, I really love drifting around on my motorcycle and I would be devastated if I can never do it again. When my sister came to visit me at the hospital, the first thing she said to me was, "I told you this would happen." I was shocked by this, especially because she did not say anything else after that. No empathy or compassion at all, it almost seemed like she was happy to finally be proven right. Now onto the part where I think I might be the a-hole. For context, my sister has been smoking cigarettes for the past 14 years. I have never really said anything bad about it, except for when she asked about it or tried to convince me of the benefits of it. So when she said "I told you so" to me at the hospital, I replied with nice response, "I will remember it for when you get lung cancer." She got incredibly upset, called me a beach and left. I have not spoken to her since, but I have gotten some angry texts from our parents saying that I crossed the line. I don't stand behind what I said because I would never do that to her if she would get lung cancer, but I meant it more as an example to show how insensitive her comment was. Am I the jerk? What do you do when your adult child is in an abusive relationship and you're powerless to stop it? My daughter is in an effing abusive relationship and I'm scared shitless for her well-being. She's been with this guy for about a year now, and from the second he moved in, I had a bad feeling about him. His attitude was all signs of manipulation and control. I tried to talk to my daughter about it, but she just brushed it off, saying that he was misunderstood and they were meant to be together. She even quit her job after only a few months because he convinced her she didn't need one with him taking care of her. On top of that, she started self-harming again, which she hadn't done since she was a teenager. When I asked what the hell was going on, all she said was, "I don't know." After 6 months living together, my daughter came home one day telling me their cat had died while they were at work. The next day we went out to get another cat since my daughter loves having pets around, but 2 days later that cat died too under mysterious circumstances when my daughter wasn't home but her boyfriend was alone with it. He said it choked on its food or some bullshit like that. We got another cat after this happened again, same thing happened, so then I decided to buy any future pets myself so this asshole wouldn't have anything to do with them. Still ended up losing another pet though. My granddaughter told us Grandpa Bear, her toy, had gone missing from her room one night when we were out, which made me suspicious because his side of the bed looked way too neat when we got back home, like someone had been there while we were away messing around with his stuff or something weird like that. But Grandpa Bear wasn't anywhere. We called animal control and filed police reports desperately trying to find him, but nothing turned up. Until my granddaughter told us what really happened. She saw the boyfriend take Grandpa Bear into the backyard before leaving for work earlier in the morning. Only problem is he wasn't there when we got back home later that night. It became obvious as F then that this guy had hidden Grandpa Bear somewhere outside, then retrieved him after we left, which freaked us out even more thinking about what else he might be capable of doing.
Am I the a-hole for not giving up my seat on the bus to an ablest stranger? I am so tired of people treating me differently just because my disability might not be as visible as other disabled people. This is not the first time I have experienced something like this, but this was the most dramatic and egregious. I'm 25 years old, but I have always been told I have a young face and people still ask me if I'm in high school. For context, I was in a car accident when I was 21, the car flipped and crushed my legs. They could only save one of my legs, and I have walked with a prosthetic leg for almost 5 years now. It's been hard to adjust to disabled life, and there were so many unexpected challenges that I needed to get myself accustomed to. Anyways, this particular incident happened on the bus yesterday. I don't drive anymore. Instead, I take the bus on a weekly basis, yet this is the first time anything like this happened. I was on the bus at around 5 p.m. going home. I have a part-time job as a cashier, and standing all day bothers my one good leg. In general, I was left with a lot of chronic pain after the accident, and I need to rest when I'm feeling weak. The bus was sort of packed since it was the end of the day and everyone was getting out of work, and there were only a few seats left. I was seated towards the back of the bus and there were no free seats around me. The bus pulled away from its next stop, and an old hunched-over lady got on the bus. She walks past the free seats in the front of the bus and heads towards the back. That's when she walks right up to me and gives me this nasty, dirty look. I ignore her, but then she starts huffing and puffing and even starts pointing at me and asking the people around them if they can believe this. Everyone else ignores her other than this middle-aged blonde lady, who gets up and raises her voice at me out of nowhere. The blonde woman looks me up and down and says, "Are you really so rude that you won't give this poor woman your seat when you're perfectly healthy?" It was so out of the blue and so rude. At first, I had no idea what to say. Before I could answer, the old lady chimes in too, calling me selfish and saying how the young generation has no respect. The two women were going on, and the blonde lady kept getting closer to my face as she berated me. Finally, I had enough, and I said, "Look, I need the seat all right." They insisted again, that I was obviously fine. That's when I simply lifted my pant leg up and revealed my obviously fake leg. I said one more time, I said, "I need the seat." After this, the blonde woman blushed and piped down, but the old lady kept carrying on. She gave me another nasty look and said, "Well, you're still much younger than me and I deserve the seat more." I was over it. Obviously, she was just looking for a fight. At that point, I just told her to shut the hell up and she gasped, but I put my headphones in and ignored her for the rest of the ride. Did I do anything wrong? Should I have given the old hag my seat? Assume my husband is the one in charge? Lose out on a massive sale? Recently I received an extremely high promotion at my place of work, It came with a 70% raise and has honestly completely changed my life. I was born into a very poor household, and I never thought that I would be able to achieve stability like this. I'm 27 years old and my husband is 33. I've always looked on the younger side, and ever since we've been together I've gotten very used to people addressing him as if he is my caretaker or something. For example, a couple of years ago, we were applying for a home loan, and the male banker literally spent the entire time speaking to my husband without even making eye contact with me once. It really bothers me since I feel like people will often ignore me and treat my husband like he's more important or intelligent than me. It's something that has continued happening over the years, and even though I try to assert myself and stand up for myself, it never stops. This week, after receiving my 4th paycheck with my new salary, I decided I wanted to lease my very first car. I've always been interested in luxury cars, and with all this new extra income, I was finally at a time in my life where I could make this dream of mine come true. Ever since I was 13, I've always wanted a sleek black Porsche for myself, so the other morning me and my husband headed over to the Porsche dealership. I just felt defeated when we started speaking to the salesman, and he immediately started treating me like some kind of second-class citizen. Just like the banker, this man did not make eye contact with me even a single time. He didn't even go to shake my hand after shaking my husband's. Instead, he spoke exclusively to my husband even though he and I spoke up multiple times to say that I was the one purchasing the car that day. It was like the salesman thought we were joking or something, and at one point, he was patting my husband on the back and saying that a man like him deserved a car like this. The longer this interaction went on, the more disrespected and exhausted I felt. It would have been a 6-figure sale and I'm sure these dealership guys make a pretty good amount of commission, especially on luxury cars like this. I decided I really wanted this guy to feel hopeful while also wasting his time. So I pretended like we were interested in the car until the very last second, when I told my husband that I changed my mind right in front of the salesman, and we put the pen down on the paperwork and started walking out. The salesman was practically begging us on his knees to reconsider as we left his office. I just looked at him and told him that if he had actually taken the time to address the person who was actually buying the car, he would have made a sale today. He followed us out to the parking lot, still trying to convince us to come back in and buy the car. But I was done, and it felt good to roll my window up in his face as he continued to beg and plead for our time and money. I got blackout intoxicated on a work trip. I'm not sure if I was assaulted. It has taken me months to process that this might not be what I thought it was, and I'm too scared to tell anyone in case something happens at work. The company I work for has trips away, and I went on one about 6 months after I joined. I'm quite an anxious person and I didn't know anyone at all on the trip, but wanted to use it as an opportunity to get more comfortable in social situations. It was a really fun and sporty trip, and my first opportunity to do the sport too. I had been in a training group for the day, and met some nice people from the company who I agreed to meet that evening for drinks. I am a very inexperienced drinker though. I'd never been blackout before and probably drink once a month. On the first evening everyone was drinking at the free hotel bar, before heading out on the town for the evening. I had met up with the training group, which included a guy I had been getting on well with that day. I wanted to do away with my social anxiety and get involved, so I had a drink at the hotel bar, a drink when we got out but I don't remember anything after that at all. When I woke up the next day I was in my dorm. We were in same gender rooms, dressed and not knowing how I got there. I received a text from the guy that morning to ask how I was feeling, and to then say we probably shouldn't have done what we did right outside the club where our colleagues were. My heart dropped because I didn't remember anything, and having never really been drinking, I've never flirted with someone, let alone worse on a night out with friends. I embarrassingly asked around that day if anyone had seen me or knew what happened, and ended up having to find out from the guy that we were aggressively making out outside the club in a very touchy and publicly inappropriate way, and proceeded to do that all the way back to the hotel. This route back to the hotel is silent, there's no people, and you can't really be seen. I don't know what happened here, but I know it took us longer to get back than it should have. When getting into the hotel, 2 women from the company were smoking outside and took me from him, took me to my room and made sure I was okay. They told me the next day they didn't trust him and I wasn't sure what this meant because everyone seemed to really like this guy. The trip ended so I assumed I had just been getting out of my comfort zone, and was embarrassed to have done this in proximity to my colleagues. I told my home friends, and they were proud of me to have finally caught up with them, and I just told them I was very intoxicated. A few months ago, I saw him for the first time since at another work event. He stayed around me most of the night and at the end, when people had started to filter, he tried to kiss me. I said I was now dating someone, but he wouldn't stop and I was confused. When we were back at the hotel, he made an excuse to go to my room and he tried to do more at that stage. I started to rethink after this, given that I've never got with someone on a night out and still don't have the desire to. I would never ever do something like this around my work or colleagues. I don't think the guy was being malicious, and at one point it seemed he wanted to see me outside of work, though after the most previous time I saw him I figured this was for intimacy. I was also still able to stand up straight so I could completely understand him not knowing I had almost no consciousness whatsoever. I'm not blaming him for not knowing what I would or wouldn't have done whilst intoxicated. Ultimately, I was single and maybe appeared in control of myself. But I can't talk to anyone at work about this because I don't want anything to happen to him. I saw him 2 weeks ago at another work event, and I stayed completely away from him. He texted me at 3 a.m. and wanted to come to my hotel. When I declined, he said he wanted to pay for my Uber to his hotel. I have tried to process this a number of times, but having blacked out previous experiences of assault, it became quite harrowing to keep trying to remember what happened. Even now, 8 months after this happened, I don't know how to make sense of it. Talking to my friends about this has also been hard. Initially, I told the story as though I was agentic, spreading my wings after a 4-year relationship. I think this was a way for me to deal with the uncertainty of what really happened to me that night.
My awful parents stole my money to buy my brother's gaming PC set. So I went full-on rage at them for stealing and move out of the house. Around a year and a half ago, when I was 15, I came up with a plan to pay for my own university fees once I finished school. It's a little expensive, so I wanted to save my parents the trouble of paying and do everything myself. I planned to save up enough money until I can invest in some cheap land back in my hometown and hopefully earn lots. I told my parents this and they seemed pretty okay with my plan. I began working part-time and worked my socks off. In those 1.5 years, I saved up around 30,000 lira, which is like 3,000 pounds, without spending a single penny. Now here's where the problem began. My younger brother had his 13th birthday last week and he always wanted to have his own gaming PC set. My parents always told him that they couldn't afford it, which made him sad and went on a guilt trip with my parents. He was always giving tantrums like a 7-year-old. One day, I forgot to bring my wallet with me when I was going to school, which had my bank card in it. When I came back, I saw a new gaming PC set right in the middle of the living room, half unboxed, and my brother crying and jumping around in ecstasy. I was happy for him since I thought they actually managed to buy it themselves, until I found out shortly after that almost half my saved up money was gone. Yes, we all know each other's bank card passwords. I was fuming and lost my poop at my parents, demanding, why the F did you spend the money I worked hard for? My parents apologized, but noted that they just couldn't tell their son that they couldn't afford his dream set when there was money available. I screamed at them and said that they've just stolen 1,400 pounds right under my nose without even considering asking me, and that they both owe me big time. My mum snapped back at me, saying that I'm still a child belonging to them and that money should be the last thing on my mind at the moment. It was a back and forth argument, and I admit, I used some colorful language there, before my mum went on a power trip and yelled at me to remember who I'm talking back to. I just stomped off in anger. I've worked so hard after school and even on weekends to get this much, and for it to be half gone in an instant is a heartbreak for me. I've notified my bank about my financial situation and reported to them that my money has been stolen. I'm awaiting a reply. I found the receipt in the box of the gaming set and waited for my brother to go to school. I packed the PC and returned it to the store. They refunded me the whole amount and I put it back on my savings. I am sure that they will be shocked to find the computer missing in my brother's room and will berate me with it, so I called my grandparents to let them know that I will stay with them for the meantime. My grandparents know what happened and they are siding with me. Truth to be told, they started calling and messaging me non-stop asking where the PC was. I sent them a text message that I returned it to the shop and made a refund because it was my money and they shouldn't have stolen from me. They called me ingrate and selfish, but I blocked them all on my contacts. I accidentally ran over my neighbor's dog and tried to cover it up by buying a lookalike. So here's the deal. I ran over my neighbor's dog. Accidentally, of course. It was a total accident, I swear. But here's where it gets really effed up. Instead of doing the right thing and telling my neighbor what happened, I decided to cover it up. Yep, I went full-on psycho and thought it would be a good idea to buy a lookalike dog and replace it. Like, what the actual F was I thinking? I don't know. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. Maybe I was just so scared of the consequences that my brain went into survival mode and came up with this insane plan. So that's exactly what I did. I went out and found a dog that looked just like my neighbor's dog, and I brought it home and pretended like nothing had happened. And you know what? It actually worked. My neighbor didn't suspect a thing. He was just happy to have his dog back. But here's where things start to unravel. A few weeks later, my neighbor comes over to my house for a barbecue. We're all having a great time, drinking beers, grilling burgers, you know, the usual poop, and then out of nowhere, my neighbor's dog shows up. The real one. The one that I ran over and tried to replace. And let me tell you, poop the fan real quick. My neighbor starts screaming at me, calling me all kinds of names, and believe me, they were not nice names. He's effing livid, understandably so. And then he starts going off about how he can't believe I would do something like this and how he thought we were friends and yada yada yada. And in that moment, I felt like the biggest piece of poop on the planet, and rightfully so. I effed up big time, and there was no way I could fix it. I tried to apologize, but my neighbor wasn't having it. He told me to go F myself and stormed off. And that was the last time I ever saw him. He moved out a few weeks later, and I haven't heard from him since. I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to be friends with someone who would do something like that either. So yeah, that's the story of how I accidentally ran over my neighbor's dog and tried to cover it up by buying a lookalike. Moral of the story? Don't be a dumbass like me and just own up to your mistakes. Trust me, it's way easier in the long run. My boyfriend asked for a paternity test for our child. As soon as the results come and show he is the father, I'm leaving him. I'm a new mom to a baby boy who is my pride and joy, and though it's been a roller coaster adjusting to taking care of a baby, the past few months have been great, tiring but great. I have a boyfriend of 3 years who is the first person relationship-wise I have ever loved, and I thought we were doing great as new parents but also as partners. Friday, he came home and he asked me for a paternity test. Just like that, it was completely out of the blue. I was putting away the dishes and he asked for one, like he was asking what's for dinner. I'm a different race from him, but our child, apart from the skin tone, is literally his mirror image from pictures I had seen of him when he was a baby. I was stunned when he asked, and his reasons were that he had to be sure he was the father. He had to have that certainty. All I remember as he was speaking is just immediately feeling pain. The man I love doesn't trust me. He would actually believe that I would sleep with someone else, cheat on him, and then try to pass off another man's baby as his. I have never ever given him reason to think I would cheat on him. I have tried to be transparent and communicate, and it wasn't enough. He told me he would give me time to think about this, that he wouldn't go behind my back and do this test, but for our relationship to move forward, he needs to be 100% sure. He repeated this because he, in his words, needed me to realize how serious he was. After thinking for a couple of days, I'm going to allow him this paternity test because I have nothing to hide. I never cheated and would have never cheated on him. Once it's proven that he's the father, I'm ending it, leaving the same day, and I am going to try my best to be a cooperative co-parent with him. In the meantime, I'm coming up with my exit plan, a place to live, and a lawyer to work out a custody arrangement in court. I can't even tell my family or my friends right now because they would go nuclear, and my first priority is our child. I hope the test was worth it to him. I was so angry and planned to leave, but the anger was quickly replaced by hurt once I calmed down. I realized if I blindsided him like that, I would be doing the exact same thing that he did to me when he asked for a paternity test. I planned to ask him to talk, but I also didn't want him to think I was trying to get out of the test. So beforehand, I booked an appointment at 2 different paternity test locations. I asked him to talk when he came home, and I made sure our child was at my mom's. I told him that whatever happened with this talk, the paternity tests had been booked and would go forward. I basically asked him his reasoning, and when he started having doubts about paternity. Was it a previous relationship? Did cheating happen? He said it was about a week before he asked me that he started having doubts. He said that he was on his lunch break one day just reading articles, and he clicked on an old article about a man who found out his 3 kids weren't his after like 20 years. This led him into a rabbit hole of podcasters and YouTube videos that encouraged men to ask for paternity tests. While he thought those podcasters were idiots, he said that paternity was an exception. He said his reasoning was that some women have done this before and he wanted to be sure. He said, you know, it's yours because the baby comes out of you, but how do I know? The test gives me that assurance. I was hurt by that, but I decided to explain how I felt. I said that for him, it was a rational request, while for me, it was basically him saying that he didn't trust me. It was him saying that he believed I would cheat on him, get pregnant, have him emotionally, financially, and physically support me during the pregnancy and birth, and basically lie to him while he raised another man's child. I told him that I understand that women had done this before, but the fact that he thought I would do this to him is what bothered me. I told him the truth, that when I was angry, I had planned to leave, and that I even went looking for a lawyer, a co-parenting plan, and a new place to live. He was stunned that I would leave for something so small. I found that to be a weird kind of irony, that he believed issuing an ultimatum about a paternity test and basically accusing your partner of cheating was something small. I told him I was really hurt by what he said, that I was still hurt, but that if he needs this peace of mind, that we would do it. He asked what about our relationship, and I told him I didn't know. We did the test 2 days later, and got the results back after 3 days. He opened both of them, and to my surprise, he's not the dad.
My parents tried to screw over my dying stepmom, and it blew up in their faces, tearing our family apart. My 17 female stepmother Jane is a wonderful, wonderful woman. She and my father got married when I was 4, and she's been a rock in my life ever since. My mother was always my primary caregiver, but up until that point her relationship with my father was bitter and I basically never saw him. Jane was the reason they developed a stable co-parenting relationship. She encouraged everyone having a good relationship with each other, and was always there to support me and my mom when things got rough. Jane was always a really hard worker. When she met my dad, he was living out of a hotel, and my mother was doing everything in her power to keep me away from him, because she was petty and angry that their relationship didn't work out. Meanwhile, Jane had a great job, a nice house, helped my dad get back on his feet, negotiated a visitation schedule with my mom, who hated her for a long time, and made sure my dad sent us money every week because neither one of them could afford an attorney to negotiate child support payments. Jane had no reason to do any of these things, but as I got older, she made it clear that she loved me as much as she loved my half-brothers who were born a few years later. I even have my own room in her house because at the time we lived with my grandparents and various boyfriends of my mom, and Jane felt that I needed a more stable environment than that. She's like the opposite of the evil stepmom. When I was 15, Jane won a big lawsuit against an airline company and got awarded upwards of $1 million. She used the money to build sizable trust funds for me and my brothers so that we would be taken care of later in life. Despite having a lot more money, she still wanted to live a fairly modest life, so she paid off the house she has, and has been living there ever since with my dad. Sure, she bought a new car and they went on a few nice vacations, but she didn't blow all her money on stupid things, which I really respected. About a year ago, things started getting really weird. Whenever I saw Jane, she seemed to look sicker and sicker, but no one would tell me or my brothers why, even though I know they knew. All we knew is that she was at the hospital a lot. Around the same time, my mom has been coming around my dad a lot more and acting really strange, basically like she was trying to romance him. Whenever Jane was in the hospital, my mother would insist on spending the night at their house and playing mom to my brothers, which was so weird to me because she never liked them or Jane. She'd be the perfect little housewife, and my mom is not like that at all. It was super fake. Worst of all, my dad started falling for it. I'm not stupid, I'm pretty sure they were sleeping together. I tried to shield my brothers from it, but they're not dumb either. I tried talking to my dad too, but he insisted it wasn't like that. Then a few weeks ago, my mom started talking about all the places she'd like to visit, how she wanted a new car and was looking to invest. Which is weird because my mom has been a bartender her whole life and has lived paycheck to paycheck since even before I was born. She was acting like she was about to get a lot of money, which started to make me really suspicious. Between Jane being sick and my mom acting all nouveau riche, I had a lot of questions. Finally, I decided to visit Jane in the hospital and ask her about my trust fund. I found out that if anything happened to her, that my dad would inherit all the money, including full control of the trusts for me and my brothers. She asked me why I was so interested in the trust fund, so I told her what's going on with my parents and how my mom has been acting with my dad. I didn't want to, but after everything she did for me, she deserved the truth. It really hurt me to break her heart like that, especially once I found out that she was basically in hospice at this point because of irreversible kidney failure. She's only got a few more months. We both cried so much. Then, 2 days ago, everything came to a head. My mom stormed in furious and started arguing with my dad. Apparently Jane met with her lawyer and changed the trust so that my dad would get nothing and all of the trusts would be controlled by my step-aunt. She demanded to know how Jane found out about their relationship, and I came out and told them that I told Jane everything. I told them that if they wanted to play stupid games they would win stupid prizes, and that I wasn't going to let them screw Jane over after all the help she gave my family when she didn't have to. My mom slapped me and my dad just looked so defeated. Then my mom told my dad that she didn't really love him, that she was just pretending so he would marry her and she could get all of the money. The worst part about it is that my brothers witnessed the whole thing, and now on top of their mom dying, they have to deal with a cheating dad and his vindictive ex. Our whole family is in ruins and I feel like it's my fault even though I know it's not. Yesterday I visited Jane again and told her about the fallout. She apologized and said that she had to dissolve my trust fund to make sure my mother didn't get a hold of the money, but that as her oldest I will inherit the house and property after she is gone, and that's worth more than the other 2 trust funds combined. My father won't get anything because she's going to divorce him before she dies, and honestly I'm happy for her. She made me promise to take care of my brothers and told me that once I turn 18 this summer I can kick my dad out of the house if I want to. And I fully plan to do that, by the way. I haven't talked to my dad since, and I can't even look at my mom. I can't believe they would conspire to do this to Jane after all this time. Just proof that they deserve each other, and I'm embarrassed that they're my parents. Once I turn 18 I'm going to cut my dad out as much as I can and cut my mom out completely. I hope she rots. Meanwhile I'm going to try and be at the hospital as much as I can until Jane passes away. Anyways, I just needed to vent. I'm really messed up about the whole thing and I feel super betrayed, although I can't even begin to imagine how Jane feels. I'm gonna be so messed up when she dies. I can't even think about that right now. But at least she's not surrounded by people who just want to bring her down. Thanks for reading. Edit to add, some people are asking a lot of the same stuff, so I'll just clarify here. My brothers, my plan is to use some of the estate money to fight for guardianship for my twin brothers so that they can live in the house while I kick my dad out. If I can't get guardianship, then I will have to let my dad stay in the house. However, once I turn 18 I will technically be an adult, so even if my dad leaves I'm still legally able to be responsible for them. The only thing I won't be able to do is stop him from taking them if he leaves. But they will be 18 in 6 years, so even if they do have to leave they will always be able to come back whenever they want. In a perfect world my dad would just leave and let my brothers stay with me, which I'm sure my bio mom would be very supportive of because right now she hates all of us, and I doubt that will change anytime soon. The trust, from what I understand, my brothers will inherit 1/3 each of the estate, and the remaining 1/3 will be used to keep the house running until they turn 18. After that it will be up to me if I want to keep the house or sell it. At that point my brothers will still have money left in the trust so they can branch out or do whatever they want, otherwise I will not sell the house and just pass it on to them or keep it and maintain it myself, and they can just stay with me as long as they need to. Edit to the edit, so I just spoke to Jane and she told me that the reason she dissolved the trust is because originally it was going to be split 3 ways between us kids and my dad would inherit the house. She dissolved my third and switched it over to make it to take care of the house maintenance, and instead put the house in my name so my dad wouldn't get it. Plus by doing that at least financially I would be getting a much bigger share. The house is worth about 1.5 times the amount of my brother's trusts. I just wouldn't be able to do anything with it until my brothers are 18, which I'm totally cool with. Sorry if I don't have a better answer, but I'm just trying to translate what she told me. My parents, the big fight happened on Sunday and I haven't spoken to either of my parents since. I think they're both at my mom's place right now, but that's fine with us because we're all still mad at them, so they can stay gone for all we care. I know technically that's not legal to just leave us alone, but I've been taking care of my brothers for over a year. I can handle a few days while he gets his crap together. Screw both of them. Hope that clears some stuff up.
What disgusting thing at work made you quit your job? I have had a knack for cleaning an organization since I was a kid. Even with 7 kids in one house, I managed to keep my home pretty clean most of the time. After working on an ambulance and cleaning up the back of a squad that was splattered with blood, urine and vomit, I thought I had built up a tolerance to the things that make most people run in the opposite direction. I started doing housekeeping in 2010. First I had residential clients, then hotels, and finally commercial properties like warehouses and office complexes. I have been credited with cleaning some of the filthiest homes in the state of Indiana. Until 2019 I had never been in a position as a cleaning lady that was so unreasonably disgusting that I just could not do what I was hired to do. I was hired in as a lead for a janitorial crew at a warehouse that I am not going to name. This warehouse was the distribution headquarters of one of the largest, most sought-after brands of audio electronics in the world. The distribution headquarters employed approximately 300 people working 3 different shifts 7 days a week. Within this huge pool of warehouse workers were groups of people of different ethnicities. Several of the ethnic groups were made up of people that spoke the native language of the country. They had been born and raised in for most of their lives before relocating to the United States. This made it necessary for them to work in an area close to one another so that communicating could be done consistently and effectively by an area supervisor that was bilingual. My job in the warehouse didn't involve much interaction with other employees. I was responsible for cleaning the cafeterias after each break, the employee gym and locker room, the outside smoking patio, and the 3 sets of men's and women's restrooms. Warehouse work can be a little messy. I had done this type of work before, but I was unprepared for what I saw when I entered the women's restroom on one particular side of the building. There were small plastic cups and bottles of water all over the floor of every stall. In there wads of wet toilet paper in piles in some stalls, and in others it had been kicked around the seat of the toilets. I couldn't differentiate between what was urine and what was water. But most of all, I didn't understand the cups and toilet paper that had been discarded on the floor rather than in the toilet they had been passed next to. I had honestly never witnessed such a personal hygiene catastrophe in a women's restroom ever before. I called for a supervisor and closed off the entrance temporarily. Before the supervisor arrived, another section of the warehouse went on their 1-hour lunch break. Employees were headed away from their workstations filing into the cafeteria, and a group of women were headed straight toward the restroom that I had just closed. Each of them were carrying plastic cups or water bottles as they approached, only to discover that this restroom was not open at this time. They were unhappy with the inconvenience and I was unable to communicate to them that it was only temporary. As they hurried across the floor to a restroom in working order, the shift supervisor popped around the corner and demanded to know why I had closed down the women's facilities. I said, "Have you seen the mess all over the floor and the toilets in here?" She quickly gestured for me to lower my voice and began to offer an explanation that almost made me vomit. She said this is a religious practice that is sacred in their country. The women stand and use the restroom so as not to have any part of their bodies touch the contaminated toilet, and they wipe with their hands, using the cups of water to rinse off and the toilet paper to dry their hands. When they're done, the toilet paper and cups are discarded onto the floor because in their country there would be no such trash can, so it is thrown at their feet and covered with dirt. I was in such disbelief that I had been hired to clean up this unsanitary, bacteria-ridden, protected practice of religion that I turned and walked straight to human resources and terminated my own employment with the company.
What's the shittiest thing someone has ever done to you? My 60-year-old mother-in-law wanted to sign her house over to us because she has no retirement and no money saved. My wife was pregnant with our second child and she told us she wanted to be a stay-at-home grandma. I would be coming in and paying for everything. So we sold our house, paid off our debt, and cut a check for $54,000 to her ex-husband, which paid off the house in full. Then I made $10,000 worth of home repairs. All bills were transferred in my name. When it came to sign the deal, suddenly she didn't want to do it. Told us she wanted things to go back to the way they were. My father-in-law told her, well then we need to take out a home equity loan to give them their money back. She refused. The next week she served us an eviction notice and moved her boyfriend she claimed was abusive to her back, and 2 days later, she threw her own daughter, my 3-year-old, and my 3-month-old baby on the streets. We tried to reason with her and then she had her lawyer threaten us with a restraining order. So now I'm suing her for my money back. Luckily my father-in-law is on our side and we were able to stay with him for the time being.
After I cheated on my boyfriend, he gave me a list of rules to follow. If I break one, he'd snap his fingers and our relationship would cease to exist. I, 24 fingers, have been with my boyfriend, 24 meters, for 6 years now, but during the 3rd year of our relationship I cheated on him with a close family friend. I had started taking him for granted and it became easy to cheat because I didn't value the relationship. He broke up with me and we were split for months. During the time I was single I realized he is a great man and a great boyfriend. I begged for him back and he took me back, but I had to promise to never speak to the guy again. I'm happy to say I never cheated since then and haven't been tempted at all. I understand how great of a partner I have. That being said, the guy I cheated was a close family friend and recently I rekindled our friendship behind his back. Nothing romantic. You ever meet someone who is a terrible partner but a great friend? That's him. I hated the fact that I let a stupid mishap ruin our friendship. My fiancé found out and was angry. I apologized and we talked and he needed space. He sent me a text of his demands to continue the relationship. Here's the text I received. I can't trust you. Whether it was platonic or not, this is the 2nd time that I know of where I have violated my trust. The hardest part isn't this, but now I have to wonder how many times have you violated my trust or done something behind my back that I just don't know about? You claim this is it, but how can I believe you? I love you and want to work on this relationship, but it's going to require a lot from you. We are postponing our wedding indefinitely. When we first got back together, it took 10 months before I felt secure in the relationship again. I have no idea how long it will take to feel secure again. You must block him on everything and you are to never speak to him again. This now includes family events. If you know he will be there, do not attend. If you didn't know and he attends, you are to ignore him. I have unrestricted access to phones, social media, emails, everything you have. Every password I want to know for any device you have. No hanging out with male friends alone. You are to be home by 1 if you do go out with your homegirls. There will be more, but these are my demands and they aren't up for discussion. If you aren't willing to do it, then the relationship is over. Take your time to think about it. That is everything? I called him, but he said he's not arguing with me about it and don't call him back until I decide what I want to do. I feel that this extremity harsh considering the fact I didn't cheat this time. Ever since we got back together, I never cheated on him. What should I do now? Update 1. We had a really great conversation. He was vulnerable and said it made him feel like I didn't value him. He was crying and it really hurt me to see the pain I caused him. He told me that we won't go forward with this unless I can promise that I won't go behind his back again, because he can't go through this pain again. I told him that I promise I will never hurt him again and will always be honest and upfront from him now. We talked about the rules and he said they will be temporary and will be adjusted when we go to couples therapy. Now it's time to put in the work to repair the relationship. I know it will be a lot of work, but I'm prepared. Thank you to the ones who gave constructive feedback. Update 2. So next month I'll have married this fool. I have been with amazing guy and we worked through a lot of issues together. I thought I loved him, and I think I still do, but not in love with him. About 3 months ago at my job, we got a new co-worker who is very handsome and extremely attractive. I mean, I've never been so physically attracted to someone in my life. We started to deepen our friendship, but romantic feelings came. I repressed mine, but to my surprise he confessed his feelings to me as well. I told him we gotta think about our spouses, but our feelings continue to grow. He told me he stopped being affectionate with his wife because he feels like he is cheating on me when he does that. He only wants to be affectionate with me. I've started doing this same thing and haven't been intimate with my partner. The big thing is a lot of people will be hurt when this comes out. He can't divorce his wife right away because of finances, but he will as soon as possible. I have to call off the wedding, but I really don't want to hurt my current finance. Update 3. I took everyone's advice and decided to end things with my fiancé. This was the hardest thing I had to do in my life. I know you guys think I'm a terrible person, but this is an unimaginable situation to find yourself in. I want everyone to know how much this hurt to do. I really wish I didn't fall in love with someone else. I wish I could make myself fall in love with my fiancé, but I can't. It took me so long to accept this. I hope you guys can understand that I can't convey this enough, that I care about my extra fiancé. I know this will be best for both of us, even though it's hard right now.
What was your most unforgettable night at the emergency room? The first time I saw a child die. People die. We all die. Seeing kids die though, that's harder. This little girl. 2 female presence in ER with mom and dad. 2 is listless and her eyes are sunk in. Mom says she's thrown up 4 times. I think she swallowed something. Child doesn't even flinch when we get blood from her and get in foresight. Fluids administered, vitals monitored. Mom keeps repeating, I think she swallowed something. Can't you get an x-ray? About 20 minutes later, this child is getting worse by the minute. Her belly is expanding, and her heart rate is increasing. She's now unresponsive. Paramedics intubate her. As they open airway, feces come out. Her belly is just huge and tight like a drum. Heart rate is 220 to 240. This baby is about to code out. Doctor decides to transfer child to a larger hospital. Via ambulance, charged nurse gets in a screaming match with him, demanding the helicopter. RN was correct. About that time, blood work comes back. Child has an insane level of cocaine in her system. When confronting the parents, mom breaks down and says kid ate 7 grams of cocaine in baggies. 7 grams, that enough to stop an adult's heart, let alone a 2. Child coded out as we were loading her onto the helicopter. It was awful. Story doesn't stop there. The whole time, the dad was just on his phone, not engaging. The mom was just a hot mess. She rode with baby on helicopter. About an hour after child and mom leave, dad comes into ER, this time, as the patient. He's having a panic attack. He's also clearly under the influence of something. It was coca and needles. He tells us he's freaking out because his daughter died in the helicopter. We stabilized him and sent him home. Story doesn't end there. Dad calls back like 2 hours post-discharge. He is threatening to come to the hospital and shoot us all because we killed his daughter. We had to go into lockdown for 4 hours until law enforcement could find and arrest him. I despise drugs. I despise people that allow babies/kids to be around drugs. Till the day I die, I will never, ever forget the death of that baby girl. Ever. Gay best friend ruins my relationship and wants to date me. On my first day at student halls, I met a friendly guy named Dominic. He was openly gay and super nice. He offered to help me unpack and go for a drink, which was really cool. I was happy to have a quick friend. He put a lot of effort into helping me organize my room, and then we headed to the student bar. I let him know I was straight, just to be clear. We had some fun chats, and I was relieved to have a new friend since I was worried about feeling lonely in the dorm. Even though he lived in a different building, we spent a lot of time together. As time went on, Dominic became a bit too clingy. He'd text and message me all the time, and he'd get upset if I didn't respond quickly. He'd ask about my whereabouts and get really bothered if I didn't reply. He didn't seem to like my other friends and would act unhappy when they were around. He even warned me not to trust them. I tried to create some space between us because I don't like clingy friends, but he held on even tighter. I still hung out with him but started worrying about our friendship. I started suspecting that Dominic might have a crush on me, and my suspicions were confirmed later. I met a girl named Anna and asked her out on a date. Dominic didn't take it well at all. He ranted to me about how he'd be jealous and that I shouldn't go on a date with her. I simply told him that I can do what I want. Then he responded by telling me that he thought we were best friends. It was weird because I hadn't called him my best friend before. It made me uncomfortable with how he was acting. I told him that while we could still be friends, I wouldn't stop dating because of that. He stayed upset, and I thought he'd eventually come around. But during my date with Anna, I kept getting mysterious phone calls that I ignored. It got really frustrating. Afterward, when I returned to my dorm, Dominic was waiting, asking about the date and those calls. I suspected he was behind them. I asked him if he was the one calling me, but he told me that he wasn't. I could tell he was lying. He started telling me negative things about Anna, claiming she was a bad person, but I was mad that he was trying to interfere with my life. He sent me fake screenshots of a conversation with Anna that made her look bad. I demanded to see the actual conversation, but he said he deleted it. It was clear he was trying to sabotage my relationship. I told him I wasn't interested in him romantically, and he needed to stop. He started bombarding me with texts and calls, even making up stories about being depressed and doing drugs. It was really creepy. He spread lies about me and Anna to our dorm mates, and things got messy. I cleared up the misunderstandings, but Dominic's lies were convincing. I blocked him on social media, and he continued to harass me with calls and texts. He even claimed Anna threw a brick through my window. I was furious. When I called the police, they found illegal drugs in his room. He disappeared after that. I changed my number and avoided him online. My relationship with Anna ended, possibly because of his behavior. I don't know though, all I know is that I never want to see Dominic again. Men on dating apps, how do you get a girl to swipe right? The first time I asked out a girl was in high school because I had been crushing on her for a year. Instead of accepting or rejecting me gently, she just started laughing like I had just cracked a prime Dave Chappelle level joke. Then she shouted in front of the entire school, "You do know that I can't ever date a nerd like you, right?" More people started laughing and it soon became the most humiliating experience of my life. As a result, I never dared ask out another girl. Now my best friend on the other hand was always confident and could easily approach women as his carefree persona made it simple for anyone to be comfortable around him. Thanks to that, he had a pretty successful dating life. I was jealous of him because I wanted to get girls as easily as him, and his life was so much more exciting than mine. While I would stay home to binge watch Netflix shows and order takeout and gaming, he would always go out with his friends to clubs and exclusive parties. After living like this for years, I got a reality check when I visited my younger brother for his birthday, and he bragged to me about a girl he had slept with. I was appalled that even my teenage brother had more game than me. That second round of humiliation led me to do something I never thought I would. I downloaded Tinder. I thought it would help me overcome my fear of rejection because if I was rejected, at least it wasn't in person so that would weaken the blow. But setting up my Tinder profile was nearly impossible since I had no idea how to make a woman swipe right on me. My bio only had my age and college name, and my pictures were taken from bad angles, but they were all I had. I wasn't expecting many matches from that, but I still wasn't happy that my messages were drier than a Popeye's biscuit. And the one time a very pretty goth girl swiped right on me, I had no idea how to keep the conversation going. I never thought I would be the type to ask a woman, "What are you doing?" every 5 minutes, but I did just that. She never talked to me again after I asked, "How are you?" twice in a row. This happened 2 more times, once with a girl who went to my high school and another with a pretty girl who showed some interest in me. After fumbling her by getting too passionate about a show I had recently watched, I got fed up with my lack of social skills and inability to flirt, and I was determined to change. So, I swallowed my pride and asked my friend for advice since he was the only woman expert I knew. I called him and begged for him to share his secret sauce or at least give me a few tips on how to talk to women. That's when he revealed something shocking. He said that he used to be just like me, introverted, had the personality of plain oatmeal and he didn't know a thing about women. I asked him how he was able to change because I needed to change as well. He told me to use a dating AI and listed off some specific ones, but he said Pickup Pal was the best one because it helped him flirt better. Obviously, I didn't believe him and thought he wanted to gatekeep his secret because there was no way an app could change an introvert into a playboy. But he wanted me to just try it and to trust him. Honestly, I didn't want to take his advice because I thought he was messing with me and trying to clown me. So, I started watching short YouTube guides about women and how to interact with them. But every guide I saw had the same generic information. Say hello, be yourself, be confident. None of that worked because I got lost after the hello part. And the one time I tried to be confident, I cracked an anime joke, which was so bad the girl I was talking to actually said she had to go home. And this was over text. After that, I became somewhat angry and almost fell into the caramelized bald man red pill manosphere when it came to talking to women, but I'm so glad I didn't. I was getting desperate, and my last-ditch effort to break out of my monotonous routine was downloading Pickup Pal. It couldn't hurt to try at this point, and even though I still didn't have high expectations for it, the app worked out better than I thought it would. I used it to fix my Tinder profile because it had a bio generator and photo analyzer. For my bio, I listed some of my cooler interests, such as photography and gaming, and copied what it generated onto my Tinder profile. And it chose the best pictures to use, which, thank God, because I originally had a picture of me holding a fish on my profile and I thought that was okay. The app told me to get rid of that first. It could also generate a response to a message to keep the conversation going, but I didn't have a use for that since I needed to get matches first. However, with a new bio and pictures, I had 4 matches in just 3 days, and I used the dating AI on all of them. All my conversations went well because I constantly generated interesting and funny replies to every message. But it didn't take me long to realize I was seriously connecting with one girl since we had the most in common. We started bonding over TV shows and games, and our conversations quickly moved on to other interests. She even liked Black Ops 2 Zombies. Talking to her felt natural, and I only used the AI when our conversation started dying because I never wanted to stop talking to her. After 3 weeks of nonstop texting, I asked her out on a date since I really wanted to meet up with her. She said yes, but then realized I had no idea where to take her. I was about to freak out, but I checked the AI to see if it had anything that would help me, and thankfully it had a date generator. All I had to do was put a location and her interests, and then it would pick the perfect places to take her. I chose to take her to this popular Mexican restaurant, and she loved the food. I was mostly worried about our date being awkward or me not knowing what to say because previously, me talking to girls IRL was similar to Bambi on ice. Luckily, our conversation went smoothly, just like it did over text, because using the AI consistently meant I knew what to say when our talks died down. Talking about things I liked and asking her if she liked it too kept the conversation going for a while, and I got to know her by asking about her past. She talked about her hardships throughout her childhood, and I realized by the way she was speaking that she still had a bit of remaining trauma. Having her trust me to tell me everything made me care and fall for her even more. I wanted to know every single thing about her, and even though this was our first date, I enjoyed it so much that I couldn't wait to go out with her again. Then, our conversations extended past texting and we called for hours instead. We were always staying up to talk and those were the best nights of my life. And it was clear we were both into each other, so I asked her to be my girlfriend. We've been dating for 3 months, and I'm really happy with her. Though I'll admit, I still use Pickup Pal when I want to take her on dates because I always want things to be perfect for her. I really hope she never finds out. Do you ever find yourself missing the annoying habits of a loved one? Firstly, I want to apologize for any mistakes in my English since it's not my first language. I've been married to my wife for over 4 years now. Throughout our dating phase and up until 3 months ago, she used to be quite annoying. She would prank me by scaring me, put her cold hands and feet inside my poop while we lay in bed, scream my name in a panicked way only to follow it up with an I love you, and even remove the cap from my tires so I couldn't use the car on weekends when I didn't need it. It was somewhat bothersome, but I didn't mind because I loved her dearly. 3 months ago, things took a different turn. My wife unexpectedly lost her mother, and naturally, she's been feeling very sad. Her mom was a wonderful and kind woman who raised my wife single-handedly after her father left upon discovering that he would be a father. She was my wife's role model, her hero. She taught my wife important life lessons, how to be a strong woman, and how to love. She helped my wife get through heartbreaks and was the most important person in her life. Since the loss of her mother, my wife has become incredibly calm. She no longer engages in any annoying behaviors. She doesn't make me salted coffee, scream my name, scare me, or let the air out of my tires. And I miss it terribly. Despite being annoying, at least it meant she was happy, with the most beautiful smile. But now, it's as if that happiness has vanished. She doesn't even shed tears anymore, she just spends most of her time in bed, cuddling with me. Her smile has faded away, and I miss seeing her happy. I miss her smile, even in response to my drinking her salted coffee, which I always knew was salted. It was a small price to pay for witnessing her happiness. I simply miss my formerly annoying wife. Update: do you ever find yourself missing the annoying habits of a loved one? Hello everyone. It's been a while since I last posted here, about 7 months ago. I didn't expect my post to receive much attention, but your suggestions turned out to be incredibly helpful, and I'm grateful for that. I apologize for the delay in providing an update. My wife's progress has been a bit slow, and I hadn't thought about giving a Reddit update until now. But here it is. Let me start by explaining my relationship with my wife's mother. We were on friendly terms, and while she didn't particularly like me, it wasn't personal. I believe her distrust of men stemmed from her own experience with my wife's father. Despite her reservations, she respected me as her daughter's partner and even gave me valuable life advice. Now, on to the update about my wife. She's doing much better now, although not back to her old self just yet. I followed your advice and decided to wait for the right moment to play a prank on her. After about a month, I woke up early one morning and surprised her by showering her with quick kisses on the cheek until she woke up. She looked a bit confused but played along. I hugged her tightly and showered her with more kisses. After a short while, I stopped, not wanting to make her feel uncomfortable. I then shouted, "I love you." Her reaction was fantastic, she giggled and reciprocated the sentiment. I told her I would make us some coffee and, as you may have guessed, I salted hers. She reacted well, spitting out the coffee and bursting into laughter. In my opinion, this prank improved her mood a bit, though she understandably still felt sad. Then, unexpectedly, she pulled a prank on me. After another month of me playing small pranks on her, mostly just shouting I love you and occasionally adding a bit of salt to her coffee, she sought revenge. I don't know what she did exactly, but she got hold of a chocolate cake that explodes in your face when you poke it with a knife. Oblivious to her plan, I began cutting the cake, and it exploded all over my face. My wife found it hilarious, and before I knew it, we were both covered in chocolate cake. We laughed so hard that we ended up on the floor, hugging each other for about an hour, without even bothering to clean up. It was an amazing moment. Currently, my wife is still dealing with sadness, but she has regained some of her usual spirited and playful personality. Overall, she is much better than when I first posted here. However, the biggest surprise is that she is pregnant with a baby girl. We are both incredibly excited to become parents. We have already chosen a name for our precious daughter, and my wife hesitantly asked if we could use her mother's name. Of course, I agreed, as it is an important name for my wife and is also quite beautiful. In conclusion, I wanted to share this update with you all. My wife is excited about becoming a mother, although it saddens her that her own mother won't be able to meet her first grandchild. I am immensely proud of my wife's strength and the amazing woman and wife she is, and I have no doubt that she will be an even more amazing mother. Thank you to everyone who provided advice on my previous post. Your contributions were incredibly helpful, and I am genuinely grateful for the time you took to help a stranger on Reddit with his not-so-annoying wife. I'm not sure if this will be my final update, but I'm glad I turned to this community for help. Today I effed up by lying about the last time I had been with another woman. Last summer/early fall, I had gotten out of a supremely toxic relationship with my emotionally/verbally abusive girlfriend, which officially ended last in October. I know stereotype is that people will talk about their past relationships in a bad light, but this was someone that drove her vehicle onto a curbed median in the middle of a main city street to prove some kind of point while screaming at me. Running red lights so that I couldn't exit the vehicle on my own accord. Needless to say, I had dropped most contact until closer to the holidays when I got an out-of-the-blue apology for the way I was treated. Telling me she had been doing a lot of work on herself and realized how she let the things going on in her life bleed into the way she treated me. Having been a close to 2-year-long relationship, I obviously still cared about her to a certain extent. However, whatever love I had for her had been tainted and was mostly destroyed by the way I was treated. Regardless, I chose to maintain contact with her, knowing full well about the absolute HLL she had put me through. In hindsight, this was my first mistake chronologically but second in terms of weight. I finally got up the nerve to put myself out there and had started dating again close to January after a fling with an older woman I'd known for years. I'm early 30s and her late 40s. I made a promise to myself that I was going to date with intent to find my person. That meant no intimacy/hookups at all, and even avoiding situations that would lead to a kiss on the first date if the opportunity arose. Respectful and with the sole purpose of getting to know the person. Few good dates here and there, but nothing worth mention. Through healing from my last relationship, I made a promise to not overlook red flags in hopes that they are only fleeting. So, most of the interactions ended after a few dates with me thanking them for their time and telling them that I enjoyed the time spent, but that I didn't feel like it was what I was looking for. Fast forward a few months, I ended up going out on a date with a woman that traveled for work. I felt like we hit it off instantly. Same sense of humor, very similar tastes, same page on the important topics, etc. She was amazing. We went on a couple chill dates here and there. Nothing too serious. Just chatted and enjoyed each other's company. After a few weeks and her week-long trip back home, things got cold. Stopped getting responses as frequently. I made another attempt at seeing her again. She ended up telling me that she had decided to take a step forward with another relationship. We were obviously both going on dates and we're both adults here. Regardless, I was pretty bummed out at first but kept up the friendship, because that's what's important to me. I could tell that she is a great person and I felt like she was someone I wanted in my life. I continued to go on dates and kept mild communication with my ex. Eventually curiosity got the best of me. I was having poor luck dating and my ex was showing interest in seeing me. I wanted to see how she was doing. Like an idiot, I invited her over. I made it clear that I just wanted to catch up. We talked for a bit. Watched a movie. It was pretty clear that she hadn't changed at all. Halfway through the movie, it started storming pretty bad and she didn't feel comfortable driving. Tornadoes were on the ground in some areas so I didn't blame her, but it was time for me to go to sleep. I have a huge bed and didn't want to make her sleep on a couch. I was single and didn't have any reason to other than to protect my own sanity. As you've probably already guessed, she came on to me as I laid there with my back turned trying to fall asleep. It was like falling back into a bad habit. Obviously I had a choice, but she absolutely took advantage of my kindness/compassion in order to stay in the first place. For anyone that's been in a similar situation, when you're single and don't have any major warning lights going off in your mental dashboard, you're almost on autopilot. It had been almost a year since we separated and prior to that, the relationship had already been on the rocks many times over. So by this point, I hadn't been attached emotionally for quite some time. I had nothing other than general compassion for someone I once loved. The next morning she left before I woke up. When I finally opened my eyes, I just laid there staring up at my ceiling confused, disappointed and almost ashamed that I didn't do anything differently. I didn't say anything to her for most of the day until she asked me if the night before was weird. I told her that it was and that it wasn't what I had planned. That I didn't regret it, I wasn't upset even though both of those were not entirely true the more I thought about it, and that something was off about it. I was the one that got taken advantage of, and there I was trying to let her down softly. Communication didn't go much further than her eventually trying to get a rise out of me with an off-the-wall hateful comment designed to get me to interact. Having already been attuned to this without being blinded by emotions, I responded tactfully in a manner that didn't feed into it, but still put it to rest. That was the end. The actual end. Next thing I know, an exact week later, I get a text from the traveler letting me know that she was breaking up with her boyfriend. We ended up hanging out quite a few times over the next couple weeks. One in particular, she let me bring her some coffee the same day we already hung out. Something that I had offered and was turned down on after a couple of our first dates back in the beginning. I felt like it was fairly clear that she wanted to see me and was still interested. Eventually she expressed interest in coming over to my house. I had already been to hers quite a few times while interested, yet still platonically at this point, so I wasn't expecting anything. We watched a movie and laid there talking about all kinds of stuff. This is where I truly fucked up worse than I've ever fucked up in my life. We ended up on the topic of past relationships and, in a negative light, she made mention of a situation that in my mind directly mirrored the timing of my past month's events. Obviously this put me on edge. At some point she asked me about my past with intimate interactions. She told me that she didn't care, but wanted to know. I said that I had been pretty much celibate for the last 6 months. She said, really? And I am. In my head I had already written off the interaction with my ex because I felt taken advantage of. Some part of me felt like it almost didn't count. Like, that doesn't even make sense when I say it out loud. For the life of me I can't understand why I thought that was a good idea. Later on that night, she ended up professing that she wanted to date me exclusively. I just started off a relationship with the woman of my dreams with a stupid lie that probably wouldn't have been that big of a deal. The next couple months was an absolute dream. It felt like the time we spent together platonically before now just made our connection grow stronger and faster than normal. Everything this woman does is amazing. I took her to meet my family and my friends. Across the board they gave a solid 11/10. They all thought she was awesome. We complement each other's personalities like puzzle pieces. She treated me better than I had ever been treated and she said that I did the same for her. We talked about everything. I wasn't afraid to tell her anything. I was already crazy about her, but I fell in love. Like a real love. Not simple infatuation, but a love that, for the first time in my life, was reciprocated fully and beyond what I had hoped for. Making love was the most amazing experience I've ever shared with someone. What we had felt real, connected and free of any fear or anxiety. Yesterday morning it all came crumbling down around me. We were going to meet up with my sister to pick something up and my sister told me that my ex was at the bar too. I didn't want to see her, but I also wasn't afraid or anything. She decided that we should opt to stay in the car. We went back home and relaxed. She ended up giving me the first massage any girlfriend had ever given me. It was past midnight at this point and I already sleep on my stomach. So, I fell asleep after about 5 to 10 minutes. Apparently the interaction we had earlier sparked a question in her head. She works night shifts, so I'm sure she sat up most of the night thinking about it. When we woke up, I went to give her a hug and kiss, but instead of the usual warm loving interaction, she kind of made distance between us in the bed and said that she needed to ask me about something. I could tell that she wasn't happy, but I didn't know why. Then she directly asked me when was the last time I had been with my ex. In all of my relationships, I've always been a loyal/faithful partner. I may not have told the whole truth before, but I'm not a liar and I didn't lie in the first place for any malicious reason. I was just scared of having something amazing blow up in my face over a stupid choice I made that already resolved itself prior to this relationship. This is someone that I love. This is someone that for the last month I had been cultivating a relationship free of fear, doubts and anxiety. I told her the truth. I have so much more to lose now and I chose to tell the truth. Somehow it seemed like she already knew. She is a couple weeks out from going out of state for her next assignment and now she doesn't know if she can trust me. I can't blame her. I told her an unsolicited lie. Regardless of my reasons, I wasn't honest about it. So currently my relationship is teetering towards destruction and I feel like a part of me is dying while I wait to find out what she decides.
My entitled boyfriend went ballistic when he found out I had thousands saved for a trip with my perfect dad. He demanded I pay off his debt for his house instead because he's broke. I recently got in a fight with my boyfriend, 30M, and his family because I refused to spend my savings on a house payment that could result in him getting kicked out of the house. I've dealt with mental health problems my entire life, but things took a turn for the worst when I turned 20. Before, I didn't have many responsibilities and I was just barely getting by with that. But now I had to work while studying in college and it was such a challenge. I couldn't do it no matter how hard I tried. My parents and I have always had a close relationship, so I confided with them about that and they were super supportive of me. They let me live with them and my dad even paid for my psychologist, medicines, all my college education and maintained me until I was 24, all while also taking care of my mom and my 3 younger siblings. I really admire my dad for how hardworking he is. He's had to make so many sacrifices, such as quitting things he enjoys and loves to give me and my siblings the best he can. He's the best and I love him to death. So now that I'm 24 and tackled my problems head on, I got a stable job that pays really well and I've been saving money for the past 5 years because I wanted to do something special for my dad as a thank you for all the sacrifices he has done for me. His dream has always been to go to Disney World, but we don't live in the USA, so we've never had enough money to travel outside of the country and stay in a fancy hotel. He is now retired but still never went and thought he would never be able to. So all the money I've been saving up is to make this happen. The only one that knew about my savings was my mom and she loved the idea. As for my boyfriend, we've been dating for nearly 2 years and he has a good job, but he isn't the best at saving his money. He bought his house before we met and he is still paying for it. Due to his poor management of money, he started accumulating a debt in the house payments. It's gotten so bad that there is a chance of him losing his house if he doesn't pay the debt. I was really worried for him, but there really wasn't much I could do. All of my savings were being used to fund this trip. Well, last week I finally reached my goal and had enough money to take my dad to his dream trip, just the 2 of us. My mistake was telling my boyfriend about how excited I was to finally be able to do this. He immediately killed my mood because he yelled that I was so selfish and how could I go on a stupid vacation trip when he is about to get kicked out of his house. I was so hurt because he knew why I was doing this and he just shat all over it. He also told me that if we were in for the long run, I should help him to get out of his debt because that could eventually be my house too. He said I betrayed his trust because I've been hiding my savings from him and a good partner does not do that. I made sure to let him know that it was not my responsibility to pay for his debt, but he kept yelling at me so I left. He went and told his mom and sister about it so now both of them have been harassing me. They came to my apartment and worked to tell me how horrible I am for not helping him and trying to convince me to pay his debt. I get that my boyfriend is going through a hard time, but this is something I've been working really hard to achieve. I don't think I should be burdened with this. Plus, my dad is starting to have difficulties walking, his eyesight and health are getting worse, so it's now or never. A week later, my boyfriend reached out to talk. I was very hesitant because he was being mean last time. After some thought, I went and he actually apologized. He told me that he never intended to come off that aggressive, he was just very stressed with his situation and took it on me. He also talked to her mother and sister to stop harassing me. He had vented to them because he was angry, but he never told them to do anything. I kind of believe that because his family has always been a bit too much. He recognized that it was not okay for him to expect money from me, but he did want to be with me and he even started talking about living together. I told him I understood that he was stressed. I also apologized for being insensitive and talking about spending all that money on a trip when I knew he was struggling. That was totally on me and I did feel bad for that. But I told him that he had no right at being mad at me for keeping my savings a secret when he hasn't been transparent with his finances either. I didn't even know how much his debt was until that day because he never wanted to talk about it with me. I made it clear that I didn't want to be in a relationship with someone that reacts that way about something I care so much about and accused me of being selfish. So I broke up with him, saying maybe we needed some time apart, and he was not happy about that. He called me a lot of derogatory language, accused me of getting my money through PR-stitution and STR-ping, and almost hit me. It was a very nasty breakup and I'm glad I saw his true colors before we made any serious moves. As for my dad, I have already started to book things for the trip and I'll give him the news on his birthday. My best friend is confused about the sun. She keeps telling me that it has changed color. Stephanie came to me this morning saying that the sun is making her question everything. Everyone my age remembers the sun being orange all day. It has never changed color. About 5 years ago, I saw the sun turn white. I remember when it happened because I was trying to draw it but it became really hard to see. She immediately caught my attention so I asked her to explain further, so she told me as kids, my sister and I would draw the sun using an orange marker. I was looking up at the sun the other day, and I thought I was about to die as I stared at a bright white light. I even asked my brother, who is the same age as me, what color the sun used to be when we were kids. He said it was orange. She paused waiting for me to react but I didn't really know what to say, so I smiled and said okay. But the sun has always been there and unless there has been some catastrophic event, I don't see how it has changed color nor have I seen it change color. We would know if something was up because we would all be dead. This rattled her. Frustrated, she went on to say that the current sun we are looking at is some sort of LED fake because it is blinding to look at as opposed to the OG sun she saw as a kid. She expressed further confusion as to how scientists have managed to replace the sun and that it must be a government-led cover-up which made sense to her because the government is always trying to cover up something. She was visibly stressed so I tried to calm her. She then said I am so scared knowing that the sun I am looking at now is not the same sun that I grew up with. I hate it. I don't know about this sun. So many people are acting like it is normal. Would you be dismissive if an imposter came into your home? I giggled. Steph, the sun isn't lying to you. It doesn't have the capacity to lie. It isn't a person so don't worry. Angrily she argued, did you even learn about the solar system at school? Have you seen National Geographic? We have lived in the same rural village in England our entire lives. I have never seen anything out of the ordinary but she is convinced. Steph stared at me and quietly said I know it has nothing to do with pollution. I'm telling you, the color of the sun has changed from orange to white. I even went on TikTok and asked what color the sun used to be and everyone said that it used to be orange. I'm telling you, each country has a separate sun. Our sun is a C-op. You heard it here first. This is the first time I have questioned her sanity. I will be taking her away for the weekend somewhere to show her that outside of her village, the sun looks the same. I think she might be stressed and to tell you the truth, I don't know what to do. How do I tell my best friend that she is sounding insane?
My wife went out last night and didn't come home until this morning. This is horrible, I'm furious right now. But I'm also depressed as hell. I know what I have to do, it's just unaliving me that I have to do it. It's fresh, and it hurts a lot. My wife didn't come home last night. She went out with a couple of girlfriends, which is pretty normal for her. She's normally back around 2 a.m. on these nights, so I waited up. Around 2:30, I called to check in. She answered, and I could hear people in the background. She told me they went to a party but were leaving in a couple of minutes. She wasn't home by 3 so I texted. It delivered, but no reply. Around 4 a.m. I called again. It rang a couple of times before she sent me to voicemail. My wife finally came stumbling through the door at 6:47 a.m. this morning. I know the exact time because I was worried. She was wearing a dress she didn't leave the house in, with mesh leggings I've never seen either. The leggings had clearly been torn, and her makeup was smudged. My heart sank when I saw her. My immediate worry was that she had been assaulted. She only shook her head no when I asked her that. I asked her what she had been doing then. She only said that I knew what she had been doing, and that kind of confirmed what the voice in the back of my head had been screaming since she walked in. My wife cheated on me last night. I asked her who it was. She shrugged almost casually and said it was somebody they met at the club. She went back to his house and hooked up with him, then Ubered home. She then said she didn't want to fight and just wanted to sleep. So that's what she did. She's still asleep now, and didn't even take a shower before passing out. Suffice to say, our relationship is over. We don't have any kids, and we rent, so it shouldn't be an extremely complicated process. I keep trying to reason myself out of it, pretending there might be something to salvage here. I've always maintained that cheating would be a red line for me. Though. I think I need to stick to that now. What did a FA mother-in-law member do to you to never talk to them again? I have 4 siblings. My parents have passed away. All of my siblings are quite wealthy, no children, all in their late 50s and early 60s. One is a retired airline pilot, so he still flies for free with his wife. My oldest son passed away in a tragic accident. He was a good man, a great mother-in-law, and every room lit up when he walked in. He was always good to his aunts and uncles even though they were self-centered and arrogant. Not one of them came to his funeral. Too busy. We're having company. Really, what kind of friends do you have if they wouldn't understand that you had to go to your nephew's funeral? One didn't so much as call me. One wife called me the day after he died and asked me to console her husband, my brother. I told her it wasn't my place to console him. After the service I realized that all the years since my parents passed, if I didn't call them, they didn't call me. I was the one making an attempt to keep the mother-in-law family together. So I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. It's been 2 years now and I haven't sent them so much as a Christmas card or called them on their birthday, and it makes me quite happy. It's like a mother-in-law pounds has been lifted off my shoulder without having to listen to those 4 arrogant idiots. They have spoken to one of my cousins and they don't understand why I don't call them anymore yet. They have not made any effort to call me. And I'm good with that. Matter of fact, I've blocked them on my phone and email. I even moved 800 miles away and have not given them my new address or told them where I live, though I'm sure through social media they can figure it out, though I did block them there too. It feels good. Parents who decided to cut contact with their children, what's the story? This is a difficult thing for me. I'm not the ideal father in this situation, I know it. All I can say is that this whole thing weighs heavily on me. I have 2 girls. Their throwaway names are Jane and Janet. They have 2 mothers, Susan and Roxanne respectively. I was 19 years old when my first daughter, Jane, was born. Her mother, Susan, decided to leave me when she was about 2 years of age. She wasn't in it anymore and found what she was looking for in the arms of a narcissistic coke dealer. For a while anyways. Later this would turn to severe alcoholism, depression, etc., lifelong struggle kind of thing. My eldest daughter has turned into a remarkable young lady, but like anyone, has her own things she deals with. Just shy of 3 years later, my second daughter, Janet, was born to a different mother, Roxanne. We dated but were not really serious, one of those types of things. This was very difficult for me as I was a 22-year-old, already paying child support and was financially and emotionally stunted. Yes, we were careful, thanks. I wasn't ready to deal with this again and that's on me. I wish I had a better mind at the time, but I had almost no contact with my second daughter until she was 7 years of age. I don't know. I just was avoiding dealing with the fact that I was single father with 2 children and 2 mothers. It was something that for me, was very difficult to deal with. Her mother, Roxanne, is a decent person, with no direction in life. Loves tattoos, never could hold a job, is a great conversationalist, and is obsessed with the alternative lifestyle. Now, a little background for those who aren't in this kind of thing. I've always paid my child support, but the effect of this on a young person financially is devastating. I am 40 and just now making enough to support myself and my family. I work in it and was fortunate enough to have a skill in an emerging industry, 1990 era. If you choose this path in life, you work and give up a large portion of yourself and your lifestyle because of the choices you've made. I could not attend college as I had no money, and no time. I tried, on 3 separate occasions, to attend a local community college. I eventually couldn't keep up with working 2 jobs and attending school, and raising my daughter by myself. We had 50% shared custody agreed between Susan and I, never by a court. Around the 7-year mark, 10-year mark for my eldest, I made the commitment that I would be involved if my youngest was interested. I had come to my senses that I was being a selfish asshole of a father and I didn't want to be that person anymore. Her mother thought it would be a good thing for everyone. She was starting to hold down a job, finally, and what single mom can't use a break? It was great. I had both the girls over to my home on weekends and we cooked together, watched TV, went to parks, etc. I really enjoyed this time with them and remember it very fondly. Just me and the young ladies that made me a special person. I lived in the Midwest during all this and eventually began to date a woman from the South, who I've known for a very long time. We knew each other as children and have been around each other from time to time our entire lives. This led to long-distance dating and eventually, marriage, 10 years almost. She wanted to move to where I was at, but was unable to due to the legal system involving her own children. I made the decision to move south and be with my wife. This was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, as it meant that I wouldn't be around the girls on a regular basis. My girls are 12 and 9 at this point. I moved and found work fairly quickly in the IT world. I paid my child support regularly and caught up on the move gap over the course of 6 months. I began to plan to have my girls come visit and they did from time to time. Jane visited more frequently than Janet as her mother had issues with alcoholism and she wanted to be away from it, and Susan would also help with the travel expenses involved. I also would visit from time to time, and stay with a couple of friends to reduce the expenses involved. Good pals are good pals, and it helped me see my kids. Janet would come to visit during the summers. And this part is where things started happening. She was to stay with us for a month during the summer as was agreed upon. Once she came to visit, her mother would constantly be on the phone with her. For hours. There was rarely a gap in their constant communication. I expressed to Roxanne that this was the time that we have with Janet and we would like to spend it with her. This was met with she isn't comfortable in the house and misses home. This continued on a daily basis. I asked my daughter if she was nervous about being with us down here and she said yes, I miss my mom. I understand that. Eventually, her mother had a friend drive down with her and picked her up 2 weeks into the visit. Maybe a month was too long for an initial start? I don't know. Next year, we did the same thing. Had both girls down for the summer, and agreed that the visit would be 3 weeks. Once again, my eldest was excited to be here and my youngest couldn't get off the phone with her mother. Once again, I expressed that we would like to have the time with her that we are allowed, and once again, the visit was cut short, this time, 1 week after she had arrived. Frustrating. Eventually, my Jane moved in with us and attended her first 2 years of high school. She wanted to be with us for a while to get away from the things at home. Again, Susan had a very bad alcohol problem. And I mean bad. Jane wasn't happy in the home she'd said and wanted a fresh start going into high school. My wife and I agreed and she moved in with us. During her sophomore year, Jane came to me one night and said, "Dad, Janet is telling people that you molested her." I was absolutely floored. The first thing I remember was confusion, anger, panic. I called but Janet refused to talk to me. Though she did say that she didn't want to be my daughter and that she hated me. I tried contacting Roxanne and her response was, "I'm not sure what's going on." As Janet would only talk to Jane once in a while now. Slowly Jane got a story out of her. When she would come visit, she was uncomfortable in the house and wasn't comfortable with any physical affection. Yes, I am aware of the signs. But I'm also the one being accused. I attempted over the next 6 to 8 months to make contact with Roxanne or Janet. But was met with "she isn't ready" kind of statements. I recall asking directly, "Do you really believe that I'm capable of something like this?" Answer: no. But I don't know what to think. Plainly. Janet just didn't seem to want contact. Y'all, this changed me. I went into depression, withdrew from my family and still feel affected on a daily basis. I'm a mess sometimes. My mind is confused, I have panic episodes. Difficult time focusing on tasks. I had frequent anger outbursts, the list goes on. 3 years pass. One day, Roxanne calls and I asked about Janet. She's doing good, keeping herself together. She's not, she's a mess. I'm in it, I know how to use social media, but she's cut contact with me. Eventually, I made contact with Janet over text messages. She expresses to me that she's sorry and that she didn't feel that she was molested and wants to be a part of my life and that she is glad I didn't give up on her and wants to try harder and loves me. I am glad, but can see that there is some serious emotional issues with this child. I also cannot help but feel that I am responsible for this due to my uninvolvement when she was young. My bed takes some serious weight. Janet is 17 now. I've sent birthday and Christmas wishes and all that kind of thing and expressed that I care for her and would love to see her, but it is completely one-sided. She never calls, nor makes attempts at communication. I see her on social media frequently with just the trashiest things. Talking about sex, drugs. That sort of thing. She's obsessed with her appearance and how men perceive her. Yeah, I know. I gave up trying to communicate with her this year in January. The last thing I said to her was that I loved her. I think she is a wonderful young lady, and I'm here for her if she ever wants to talk or come visit. I would welcome her with open arms. I haven't heard a word back, but I watch from a distance and sometimes, I am disgusted from the window from which I have to watch her. I am afraid that she is turning into a very trashy young lady and it's like watching something you know you can't affect. Update 7. I told my mom that her coming out is what ruined things between us. So, first, I haven't seen my mom since winter break and I do miss her a lot. It's weird because I don't want to go to her house and my therapist has been helping me deal with it, saying this is the time to learn to be myself, but I do miss her a lot and I wish I could see her. At the beginning of last month, my mom did start going to therapy herself and I was supposed to go and see her for Valentine's, but her therapist said she was unstable and made it an unsafe environment for me, so I couldn't go. She texts me good morning and good night every day, but whenever I've called or FaceTime she would hang up and I know that because it ends after a ring or she'd text me to not call. I talk to her wife on the phone every week and she said she's been getting better. My cousin got engaged last week and my mom did call me then. My mom and my cousin are really close and I'm so happy she's getting married, so it's a big deal for all of us. And my mom promised me that she'll come over whenever my cousin actually starts planning because she doesn't want to get married until November. She did start making those jokes again about me and my boyfriend being next, but stopped when I asked. And when she called, my mom told me that therapy has helped her see she had the wrong view on some things, so she said she's sorry for not taking me with her when she came out and moved. She said that's why I was being resentful and thinking horrible things, and if she could do it all over again, she would take me so we could be as close as we were. She said she didn't take me because she still loves my dad and was worried he would be broken without me and she didn't want to uproot my life. She did say it was nice to get a break from being a day-to-day mom, but it hasn't been worth how bad things have gotten between us. She promised me I am the most important thing in her life and when therapy gets her to a place where she can be herself again, we will be just like we used to be. I don't know, every time I think about the call it's been confusing me because I'm happy that she finally said sorry to me and that it's not my fault and she was wrong to go without me. But at the same time the call just kept making me feel like she's never going to get to where she needs to be even though she's in therapy. I know I'm being ridiculous or worrying too much because I tried to tell her that, but she didn't get what I meant. My step-grandparents did come over for the weekend though. We had a lot of fun together and step-grandpa and papa promised me that he'd get us Lakers tickets if they made it to the playoffs. And not just him and me but my cousin, her fiancé, my dad and his wife too. So I really hope that they do. They did ask me about my mom and told me she's got a really big promotion at work, but I guess they knew talking about her was making me sad since they only did it once. What's the best thing to do when you get caught watching adult films? I don't know if you'd call it the best thing, but I've definitely been caught watching adult films before. It's not the most comfortable feeling, that's for damn sure. The first time it happened, I was in high school and still living with my parents. I had a friend come over to watch a movie, but afterwards, I didn't feel like going to bed yet. So I went on my laptop and started watching a video. I didn't even have headphones in, which was my first mistake. All of a sudden, I heard a knock on my door. I didn't have time to pause the video, I didn't even think about it, so I just closed my laptop. My mom came in and saw it on the bed. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. I could feel my face turning red, and I stumbled over some words about just wanting to stay up for a little while. She didn't buy it, of course, and I got a long lecture about how adult films was disgusting and how it would turn me into a pervert. Honestly, I didn't really care about what she was saying. I was more embarrassed than anything else, but I did learn my lesson: always wear headphones. Nowadays, I'm living on my own, so I don't have to worry about being caught by anyone who's going to lecture me. But it's still not a great feeling to think about someone walking in on me while I'm getting off. It's one thing to have a partner who knows what you like, but when it's a friend or family member, it's just awkward. So, what's the best thing to do when you get caught watching adult films? I don't know if there's really a best answer to that question. It depends on who caught you, what your relationship is like, and how you want to handle the situation. But one thing's for sure, it's definitely not something you want to happen again. I'm stuck in a loveless relationship because I cheated on my wife. I had an affair, my ex-wife divorced me, and my kids absolutely refused to speak to me. I was an incredibly involved dad. Most of their lives I worked 1 to 2 days a week and then stayed home with them the rest. I was closer to them than their mom, and I'd like to think I've never disappointed them before this. I made a mistake. It's been over 2 years since it all came out and I haven't been able to make any headway. My eldest is hung up on the fact that I now have a young son. Every firstborn of each generation in my family has been a boy for a long time, and she broke the streak. I honestly could not care less about that. I've always thought that pressure was stupid, and I'm not a traditionally masculine guy that always wanted a boy. But she's so hurt that I have a son and is convinced that's all I've ever wanted, and he's replaced her and my daughters. None of that is true. All of my girls said they don't consider themselves to have a brother and want nothing to do with him. All 4 of them feel betrayed and blame me for breaking up our family. I deserve the blame, it's my fault and I take responsibility. But I can't change the past, and I don't know how I can begin making up for it. My ex has full custody of them, but I'm supposed to have visitation 1 weekend a month. They're all in therapy, and it was suggested to not enforce the visitation and respect their boundaries while they work through it. I've done that the entire time and there's no progress made. Does anyone have any suggestions about what I can do here? My ex absolutely hates me but was always supportive of the girls staying in contact with me. She's respected their wishes but still gives me updates once in a while. My eldest is turning 18 soon and graduating this coming year and probably moving away for university. I feel like the time to make up with her especially is slipping away. I know I'm the bad person here. I was a terrible husband, but I was honestly a really good dad, and I miss my girls. Has anyone been through something like this? How did it turn out? What are your suggestions? What are you still salty about? Kindergarten, playing with a kid in the sandbox, was a fairly drizzly day. We're making a castle and there's a puddle a few feet from us. He wants to dig a moat around the castle, and I say sure. So he just kinda jams his hand in the dirt and starts pulling, making way too huge of a channel, which he immediately realizes is going to just destroy our castle. So I say, quick, build a dam to stop the water. He freezes, stares at me with wide eyes and mouth agape before running off. I think this is strange, but okay, whatever. I save the castle, so I go back to digging when the teacher runs up and grabs me and says to go to timeout, to which I obviously protest and say no, what the F, I didn't do anything. She then immediately says she knows I said a bad word and to not try and lie, to which I am again confused and say I did not. After a few back and forths of her trying to pull me away by the arm and me rather violently resisting, it occurs to her to actually ask what happened. I explain the story. I still remember her face kinda dropping, realizing the other little shit thought I said damn instead of damn, and then immediately ratting on me. Tries to say, well, maybe use a different word, to which I again vehemently protest against, because no, that is the correct word for such a situation and that's just how it works and it's his fault for not knowing the word, etc., until she finally gives in and explains to the kid that I did not swear, and that no one likes tattletales. I am in my 30s and on the other side of the country, and I still remember this as the very instance in which I gazed upon my fellow man and wept, for he is stupid.
What happened in school that still pisses you off when you think about it today? We had this multicultural fair at my elementary school, and the faculty wanted a Japanese kid to do origami at the Japanese station. I was the only kid that knew origami. I was, and still am, Filipino, so they had me pretend to be Japanese and do the paper cranes and frogs and shit. It was just ridiculous. I was in the school finals of some general knowledge quiz competition. The question I was asked was, what is the collective noun for a group of whales? I answered confidently, a pod. The illiterate bloody teacher had a school written on her answer card, refused to listen when I assured her it was indeed a pod. Her ignorance cost me the grand title and I was practically in tears. In front of the whole school, at the injustice of it. Everyone then labeled me as a bad loser. Will never forget it. Still seethe on it from time to time. It happened in 1985.
I yell at my brother and make him pay when he eats my food. I'm a 17-year-old girl who is balancing 2 jobs in senior year while my 24-year-old brother has no job and lives upstairs in our attic with his girlfriend who also has no job. They'll sometimes go deliver food but they spend all of that money on alcohol. My mother pays all the bills and sometimes buys groceries but that gets a little hard with all my senior fees she pays plus I go to a private school so that's more money. Ever since I got my job I started to buy myself and my mother food so we could have something to eat for the week. I started noticing my brother coming down into the kitchen multiple times a day and the food would be gone that night. If I bought food Monday all of it would be gone by Wednesday morning. We began hiding the good food but eventually, he'd find that and eat it. I even wrote my name and do not eat on stuff but that didn't stop him either. Once he ate all the food that was it until the next week I'd get paid and we'd only have bread, pasta and cheese to eat for that week. About a month ago I went to the doctor and found out I lost a substantial amount of weight in 3 months and I decided to put my foot down since my mother never would. Every time he'd eat anything I text him a fee for the food. I'd keep nagging him and he'd eventually pay me back. Well about 2 days ago I bought a case of a weight gain protein drink. Nobody else in my house would have any reason for drinking them. The next day when I woke up the whole pack of 6 was gone. The empty case was left in the fridge. I exploded and called him and his girlfriend losers who needed to get out. I let 3 years of anger out and lost it. I told them they both owe me over $1,000 worth of food for these past years and I left before he could respond. While at school my mom and grandparents kept texting me about how I was out of line and how family doesn't treat each other like this but I can't find it in myself to care. I asked my friends what they thought and there were mixed opinions but the majority said I was out of line and should have let my mother handle it. What is the greatest conversation you've had with a stranger? When I was in high school, I was a lazy student who spent most of my time goofing off with my friends. I didn't really see the point of school because I was always at the bottom of the curve, failed every major exam at the end of the year, and was counted absent more than present. Surf and turf or steak and lobster nights were far more interesting to me than taking a test on the assigned material. I went to public school in a rather wealthy town and I was way out of my league. With my lack of studying and academic performance, I knew I wasn't going to college. I just didn't know when that was going to happen, or how it would happen if it did. It never occurred to me that it actually would. I was 17 at the time, during the last week of my senior year and it was Friday afternoon of the last week of school. I was in the study hall, sitting in the back studying, yes, studying, and the study hall teacher wasn't even in the room so everyone was just kind of hanging out. I noticed the janitor coming around with a broom and he had this really wide gate that traced the perimeter of the room, as if he was circling wagons. He made 3 laps around the room and then came to a stop right in front of me before saying, "So, I'm guessing you're not like the rest of these kids then." I was caught off guard at first since I didn't say a word to him. But then I realized that he was looking down at the floor at my shoes. I must have been the only kid in the room who was wearing a nice pair of dress shoes. Except for that, I certainly looked the part to fit in with them. The janitor said, "You're either going to end up really great or really terrible." I was trying to smile at the time but the tone of what he said really gave me pause and caught me off guard. He continued, "There will be lots of opportunities along the way. Big ones, small ones, in-between ones. I could tell you to study hard and pursue your interests but that would be redundant. You already know that. The real question is what you will do when opportunity presents itself. Little things. Be kind to someone who is down and out. Someone who doesn't have a friend in the world." I interrupt the janitor at this point and say that I don't have any friends in this room. He said, "People come and go. You'll see. Make new friends. But if someone is down and out, make that person your friend. That may be the kind of person you will need someday." This is getting a little woo-woo so maybe I interrupted him again and asked what he meant with that. He said, "Challenge yourself. Find your passion and don't just settle. Learn to defend yourself, just in case. Remember there is nothing really new in this world. Don't be afraid to fail. If you do fail, get back up and do it again. Do things others won't do. Get outside. Enjoy nature." This is when I asked him if he went to college and he laughed and said, "Not hardly." He said that he grew up dirt poor and dropped out of school by the 8th grade. It took me aback but I guess that's part of the janitor's charm, his realness. He said, "Don't feel bad for someone who has it easy in life. You don't learn from easy things, you learn from hard things. Don't pity people who live a life of ease. You don't know how they got there. Don't look at your peers. Look to the past, those who came before you. Be careful at whom you point your finger. You might want to change the direction the finger is pointing. And you kids are nothing but trouble these days." Hearing that, I deadpanned, "We're kids?" The janitor was quite proud of that and said, "Ha, that's more than I've heard from some people twice your age." Then he sort of scuffed his shoe on the ground, took a deep breath and said, "You know why you're here. You have your own unique ability. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Everyone is special. Everyone is capable. If, on the other hand, you're really just a slacker who will not succeed no matter what, then at least you know that now too." With that, he gave me a firm handshake, wished me luck and headed toward the door. I said out loud that I appreciated his words and he said quietly, "You're worth it, kid. Don't settle for less. You're not alone." I never saw the janitor again after that. The week after school ended, my parents came into my room and said something like, We heard some great news today. They gave me the green light to take a trip with my uncle for the summer. I would be going on a family hunting trip to Canada with my older uncle. He was a lifelong bachelor and hunter who worked like hell all his life and never really had anyone to share any of it with. He would fly me up to Canada, show me the ropes with a gun, and we'd hunt together. That was probably the best summer of my life. As soon as I got to town where we were going to depart, he told me that my grandfather had opened up his bank account and deposited $40,000 in my account to help pay for college. My uncle told me that he knew what was going on with my academic performance because he had been in touch with my grandfather for years. I had no clue. My uncle handed me a one-page typewritten note from my grandfather that was dated over 6 years prior that said, "I care about this boy and want to help him. Use whatever you want from the account for your hunting trip together, but I want him to have $10,000 for college at the end of it." I went from being convinced I would never graduate high school to having zero student loan debt after I finished a year of community college. I worked my butt off from there on out and ended up going to a great university. I was admittedly mad when I learned of my grandfather's organized plan behind the scenes, since I wanted it to be my hard work that got me there, but I came around to appreciate the full story anyway. That janitor said something that really stuck with me. I had developed a persistent cough during that trip that didn't abate no matter how much I tried to clear my throat. I was taking a zero-calorie beverage in place of meals during lunchtime and at supper, out of a feeling of wanting to consider other people first, because too much food created a feeling of guilt when being around a table filled with people who didn't have enough food. I had the most profound dream the morning I was to leave town. I met the janitor. He was sitting right next to me. He said, "You had the right idea. Eat however much you want. You may want to reconsider your beverage choices, as I noticed you haven't touched it in a while." I replied that I felt it was more important to make sure everyone had some. The janitor said, "You're worried that they might consume your drink since they are thirsty. Let me ask you this. Are you giving with the understanding that whatever you might give is going to be diminished in some way?" And I told him it bothered me that might be how the person receiving it might perceive it. We live in a world of perception, but I know for a fact that nothing is taken away from you unless that's what you indicated that you were comfortable with. Certainly, you can't be worried about what everybody else needs when you might overlook what you need. People figure themselves out based on how you interact with them, but you don't let anyone else tell you what to think, or how to act or react. Do you get me? At the time, it sounded a little convoluted to me and I really didn't understand what he was talking about. After my 10-year high school reunion, I sat in the parking lot with a friend and wondered what would have been different if I had been a little more outgoing with people.
A shameless guest was forcing my brother to see what was under his kilt. She was stunned and started crying when I slapped her in the face. My little brother, 16, was an usher at my brother's wedding. The entire men's side of the wedding party wore kilts. The bridesmaids wore dresses that matched the tartan. It looked really cool. This absolute beach got drunk at the reception and kept trying to see if it was true about men in kilts. All the guys including my brother told her to leave them alone. I think the only guy she didn't harass was the groom. Some of the boys were outside the hall talking and vaping when she went out there. I was there already. She literally started chasing Andrew around to look under his kilt. The other guys were telling her to stop and hiding him behind them. I had had enough. I went over, grabbed her arm and gave her a little slap. Not a full-handed Russian competition slap, just a cupped palm slap that makes a lot of noise but doesn't hurt much. That stunned her. She started screaming that she was going to call the cops. I asked her how old she was. She said, "I'm only 18, you die." I said that she was sexually harassing a 16-year-old in front of witnesses. I asked her if she wanted me to call the cops for her. She started saying that she was just playing around and wasn't trying that. I asked her if the genders were reversed and an 18-year-old guy was trying to look under a 16-year-old girl's skirt what she would think. She went back into the hall, but a lot of people were talking about it when I came back in. My brother, the groom, said I did the right thing but that it was causing drama with his wife's family. I slapped her cousin. I went to where she was crying and I apologized for the slap. I didn't try to explain why I did it, just that I was sorry I slapped her. She accepted my apology and I tried to walk away. Her mom, an aunt of the bride, said I was lucky if they didn't call the cops. I asked her to ask her daughter if she wanted that. She was very emphatic that she did not want to involve the police. The drama died down and the rest of the reception went well. I have heard from a few people that I shouldn't be starting fights at weddings. I just said I was stopping bad behavior. We just dropped them off for their flight and are on the way home from the airport. My mom said that I was lucky that it didn't go further than an apology and that I could have gotten in real trouble. I'm kind of sick of holding in why I did it, so I told her the next time she was okay with her kid being intimately harassed, she needed to let me know. Now she is steaming that no one told her what happened.
I took one for the team and dated a fat girl. Said girl is now my wife and she just found out why I agreed to go out with her. 2 years ago I was at a party with a friend of mine named Joshua. Josh suddenly spotted two girls. The one he was interested in was this pretty blonde while the other was her beluga friend. Josh turned to me and urged me to be his wingman by taking one for the team and distracting her friend while he chatted with the blonde. After a little back and forth, I decided to just do it to be a good friend. So we made our way over and made our move, where I would go in first and start chatting with the friend while Josh began flirting with the girl he was interested in. Again, this friend I was talking to was by no means unattractive in the face, just a beluga. I thought she was very sweet, even though I was just talking to her out of obligation. It didn't really matter anyway cause ultimately the girl Josh was into already had a boyfriend apparently and had seemingly brushed him off, with him eventually patting me on the back to signify I didn't have to chat with her friend anymore. So I decided to politely end the conversation, however, not before she asked for my Instagram, which I decided to give her. I didn't really think much of it at the time, and I was certain I would never see her again. However, a couple days later I ran into the same girl in my school's campus store. I didn't really recognize her at first, but she seemed to know me immediately. We decided to chat for a bit, and I was reminded of her name, Megan. Anyway, it was really just small talk until Megan suddenly seemed a little awkward. I asked her if everything was alright and she replied that nothing was wrong, but she wanted to know if I wanted to go out with her sometime. This actually came as a shock to me, as it was the first time a girl had ever made the first move and asked me out. So, even though she wasn't really my type at all at the time, I said yes. And that was probably the best decision of my life. Me and Megan really hit it off, and before long we were in a serious relationship. Any qualms I had about her weight were gone immediately after the first time we had intimacy, as I actually found her body to be really soft and comforting. More to play with, as I've always said. I had never felt so relaxed cuddling with someone before I met her. And there was a lot to cuddle. We've been dating for 2 years now and I absolutely love her. She's my everything, and I have even been thinking of proposing as soon as we are both done with school. Everything was perfect, until last month. Last month, we hosted a small get-together just for a few friends who are also in relationships, like a couple's game night sort of thing. It was here where Josh, who has been my good friend for years now, was pretty intoxicated, and made a joke about how if he had never forced me to take one for the team back then I would have never found the love of my life. The joke didn't really register to me as anything negative, and I was also out of it, so I just laughed it off. Megan was cuddled up next to me on the couch though, and asked what Josh meant by that. I told her nothing, but Josh, being the intoxicated idiot that he was, elaborated and told her the story about how we met through my perspective at the time. Megan just said oh. And didn't really react, so I figured she just brushed it off. However, the rest of the night she seemed kind of distant and even a little sad. Finally, once everyone had left, she let it all out and started crying. She was essentially in shock because this whole time she thought I approached her because I was interested in her, and learning it was because I was forced to seem to bring back old insecurity within her. It doesn't help that she's actually gained weight since back then, and now is truly big, even though I don't really have any problem with that and I've told her that multiple times. More to cuddle and more to love. I immediately gave her the full story, about how I fell for her right after that, and I have loved and adored her ever since. She seemed reassured and we even cuddled the whole night after that. Since that night though, she's been acting differently. It's like she's lost her confidence around me. She only wears large, baggy clothing even though she used to never before. She refuses to change with me in the room and hardly eats in front of me. Before, I used to playfully tickle her stomach sometimes and she'd always smile and play along. Now she seems insecure when I so much as accidentally graze it. She also refuses to have intimacy without a shirt on. I miss seeing them rolls jiggling sometimes. So far I sat her down multiple times and explained that her body is incredibly attractive to me and there's no one more beautiful in my eyes than her. But it's like she doesn't believe me. Lately I've been thinking about offering her to come to the gym with me, but I'm scared she may be more insecure at that suggestion. Have you ever made your bully cry? My coworker Z is disabled from the waist down. She is the most obnoxious loudmouth to ever breathe on this planet. She has no personal hygiene either and expects to be treated like royalty because she is a turnip. Because of this I never hang around her, but she has these two friends who keep poking fun at people and think they are the funniest people around. 2020 was pretty bad for my family and my coping mechanism has been binge eating, which led me to gain weight. Some coworkers told me that she has been calling me Snorlax behind my back, but I didn't care because she didn't say it to my face. A few days ago, we had a team building exercise and had to give each other endearing names, and she named me Snorlax and everybody started to laugh. I said that I didn't find that funny and decided to not participate any further. The HR called me in and told me that it wasn't meant in a mean spirit and that I shouldn't take it to heart because being silly is Z's nature, but she said that she was going to talk to Z and ask her to not call me that again. Our team has a WhatsApp group, and the next evening Z shared a video of a fat man dancing without a shirt and wrote, "Look at Snorlax everyone." This was extremely petty, so I confronted her about it the next day and she told me that she was only joking and I shouldn't take it to heart. I said that I was going to complain to the HR and she asked me to go ahead, and when I moved a few steps away I heard people laughing. When I turned I saw that she was imitating the guy from the video. I yelled at her that it would have been actually funny if she could rise up on her 2 feet and then dance, and I said again that she should get up from her chair to make everybody laugh. She started to cry, like she absolutely lost it. I thought that she was only faking it for sympathy, but they had to take her to see a doctor because she wouldn't stop crying. Now I'm suspended for 2 weeks and I don't know how that will reflect on my performance review in the future. I was working my butt off for a promotion. My awful teacher assumed I'm adopted because I have 2 dads. I pretended to be upset that I'm learning this for the first time to make her embarrassed. I'm in high school and this was in my English class. Our real teacher is on paternity leave and we have a long-term substitute. So yesterday she was telling us she wants us to write personal memoirs about something very important in our lives, and she goes about listing various examples for different students. She told me I could write about being adopted and how I felt when my parents told me. Now I must have made a face then because I'm not adopted. I have 2 dads, but they had me through surrogacy. So technically there was a legal adoption for my non-bio dad, but one of my dads is my bio dad, and my bio mom is my other dad's sister who donated her egg and carried me. I think it would be a stretch to call me adopted. Also, the sub has no basis to even know any of this because as much as I've written in class is just that I have 2 dads. Anyway, she's kinda old school and doesn't like when we talk too loud, make any normal faces, and whatever. She called me out on making a face and was like, if you don't want to write about being adopted you can choose another important topic to your life, maybe how you help your dad at home? One of my dads has cerebral palsy and is mostly blind from optic neuropathy. I did write briefly about that in the intro assignment with our other teacher, so he must have left them with her to get to know the class. I was confused, so I said, I'm not adopted. She just puts her hand over her heart and goes, oh, honey. So now my brain, which was lagging, caught up and I realize she's only thinking I'm adopted because I have two dads. So at this point, I'm like, whatever, I'll just play into it. So I look upset and I'm like, I didn't know I was adopted. She's kind of panicking a bit and telling everyone to just start writing something. A lot of my friends are laughing under their breath. Because they know I'm not adopted, so she's telling everyone to quiet down and it's not funny and to get to work. I'm like, what do you mean I'm adopted? She's trying to tell me not to worry about it and just ask my dads when I get home. And I'm like, how can I be adopted? So she just sends me to the school counselor. And I told her this story basically, and she gave off the vibe that it was a shitty thing to mess with the sub that way, and I could have just explained I'm not adopted because now I've made her worry unnecessarily and embarrassed her. I don't think parts of my life are up to her to decide what I want to share or not, and I feel like it's on her if she feels embarrassed for assumptions she made.
Am I the a-hole for being pissed off that my husband once again made plans for us to spend Mother's Day with his mom? I've been with my husband for 7 years. For the first 3 years of our relationship, his mother lived in Canada, so we didn't see her often. After that, she moved back to our home state, NJ. Her birthday is 2 weeks before Mother's Day, and we always end up bringing her out for her birthday, and my husband, despite us not being able to afford it, treats her to a meal. And then on Mother's Day, same thing, lets her pick the restaurant and we go treat her to a meal. For the past 2 years I have told my husband that I'm honestly fed up with doing this. I told him that we should be considering her birthday dinner to be a part of her Mother's Day gift since it's so close to the same date, and that for once, I would like him to give me a special Mother's Day. Last year I was so upset about it because all he got for me on Mother's Day was $12 storage bins for our kitchen, and then we shipped right off to go treat his mom to an $120 meal. He said this year he would make sure my Mother's Day was special. Well, he was online searching for a gift for his mother for Mother's Day, so I assumed that was going to be the only thing he did for her this year. He typically doesn't buy her gifts and just brings her out to eat. The necklace he ended up getting her was $130, because he had it engraved. But this morning she calls him and he said, well, start planning where you want to go out to eat on Mother's Day so I can plan ahead, and I just immediately felt gutted. I loaded up the kids and went to the playground. He called me 20 minutes later and asked where I had went, so I told him I went to the playground. He asked which one and said he would come down, and I told him I wanted space. When he asked why, I told him it was because once again he's doing poop for his mom on Mother's Day, on top of already getting her an expensive gift, so I know for a fact I'm going to be left in the dust, per usual, and I was extremely hurt that he told me it wouldn't happen this year and he went against that. He tried arguing that it's for both of us, but she literally gets choice of the restaurant every single time, and I'm basically ignored the entire time I'm there and left to deal with the kids while he's chatting it up with his mother. I could understand if she wasn't around often and this was their chance to reconnect, but she's here nearly every other day. He says I'm being ridiculous and said, how do you know I didn't plan something for you too? So I asked him if he had and he said, well, no, but I can. I told him to forget about it and in a petty rage, stated that I will just get over it and accept being an afterthought, and hung up. I then called up my girlfriends and we made a plan to all go out on Mother's Day. I haven't been out in over a year. Well, I just got home and my husband said he had something in mind that I might enjoy, and I told him not to bother, as he and his mom will be in charge of the kids for the day and that I would be treating myself to a girl's day. He is now saying I'm wrong because I didn't give him a chance.
What is the one thing you found out about your significant other you wish you never did? She drunkenly admitted to her friends that her ex-boyfriend was the one and she'll never get over him, still not sure how to handle that information.
He had a notebook of every detail of my life, including menstrual cycle, and also kept all the details of my friends and family members, even ones I had never mentioned, and we were only together for 2 months. He once dated a girl that he was getting fairly serious about until he showed up to a family event and she was there. I was engaged to a guy several years ago who I found out was cheating on me with men. When I found out, he came clean and told me he was just seeing if he was gay, and he had 3 score with random guys, met some dude on Craigslist and got handed, did so many wild things and didn't see it as cheating because it was with guys. Several weeks before I found out, we were in Japan, where he had proposed. One night in this lovely hotel he calls me into the bathroom, babe, come see what I can do. He had a full 1-liter soft drink bottle up his back end, just the cap poking out. I think maybe I should have been suspicious at that point, and it's a core memory I would care to forget.
Guys, has a girl ever lied about her age to you? At the age of 22 I fell in love with a girl who misrepresented her age. She said she was 21, turns out she was 16. I never did anything inappropriate, I kissed her twice, and was only ever in public with her. 16 years ago today I took a plea deal. I pled guilty to things I didn't do, because the detective threatened to go after my family if I didn't take the plea. I lost a USMC scholarship to Citadel, full ride, I became a convicted felon, spent 5 years on probation, spent 10 years registering as a big red dot, and most of my job opportunities for life. I lost everything. My life ended that day, and every day I'm still here is out of spite at the injustice. I found out 12 years ago that the detective applied for a grant using my case, and had submitted the application 2 days prior. He found out the day before. The DA and my attorney had worked a deal to dismiss the case for lack of corroborating evidence. He decided to charge me with 132 counts of witness tampering, obstruction of justice, etc. The girl was writing to me at the jail, and I had sent letters home to a friend, who sent them on to her. They would charge my friend, and anyone I had talked to as well, just to make me cave. What was I worth? $750,000 of federal grant money for the prosecution of intimacy crimes. Because she and I talked online via MySpace as an extra method of communication, that meant he had an epidemic and needed money to run stings. I get really depressed every year during this whole week. Knowing that last night 16 years ago was the last time I was excited and had hope for tomorrow is brutal. I took the deal knowing it would take years to undo. I never thought it would take this long, and I'm rapidly running out of motivation to continue with anything. The girl married some dude on her 18th birthday and popped out her first kid just a few weeks later.
My golden child brother destroyed my grandfather's heirloom, so I exposed his inappropriate relationship. My brother has been a golden child since the day he was born. My parents desperately wanted a son, and when they had him, all of their attention was shifted onto him. As I was the older sister, I was left behind a lot, and neglected severely. The neglect was bad. I would go hungry some nights because my brother wanted a second portion of food and I was forced to give him my plate. Girls are meant to be skinny anyway, my mother would say to me whenever she did this. My birthday was not even celebrated most years, and when it was I would get a few cupcakes. I don't remember getting a single birthday present past the age of 10 from my parents. My brother took glory in this too. The entitlement spoiled him a lot. He never failed to bask in the fact that he was better than me, that he was the favorite, and he was a bully too. I had a lot of bruises from him, and being a girl I could not fight back a lot. Whenever his birthday came around, he would show off his presents to me, knowing that a few months ago when it was my birthday, I got nothing. This was one of the ways he made sure I knew I was inferior to him. I had enough when I was 16 after a particular event. It was my birthday. I woke up knowing it was not going to be celebrated heavily, but this year I was hopeful it would be different. A few weeks ago I told my parents I would love it if my birthday was celebrated this year, and I was not asking for extravagant presents, just a nice cake and perhaps a family dinner at a restaurant of my choosing. They agreed, and being excited, I booked a restaurant for us four for my birthday. Well, when my birthday came, there was no cake. Cool, whatever, maybe dinner will still go ahead. The table was reserved for 6 p.m., and when 5 p.m. rolled around my parents told me they are taking my brother go-karting and that I can order myself some pizza later. They're going for food later, and won't be back till late. They left before I said anything, and I cried a lot. That was the day I moved out to my grandfather's house. I was gone with my belongings before they came home. My grandfather was the only person who understood me. He gave me presents. I was never hungry at his. He was my comfort person. When my parents found out I was gone, they called me, and when I explained that I would like to live with my grandfather, my mother responded with a lukewarm, "If that's what you want." None of my family spoke to me for the next 7 years. The next time I saw them was my grandfather's funeral. We made small talk, and I found out that my brother was 21 with no driver's license, not in school, dropped out of high school, was still living with our parents, had no job, and had a 16-year-old girlfriend. It was appalling for me to realize that my parents were okay with him leeching off of them, but it did not surprise me. Well, at the funeral I was wearing my grandfather's watch, a watch he left for me, and a watch that was priceless to me. It was not a watch I planned to wear a lot, just on special occasions, and of course I wore it to the funeral as a way to commemorate him. My mother told me that the watch looks expensive, and I told her I do not care about that. Well, she butted in, suggesting I sell the watch and give the money to my brother. Apparently my brother was looking at getting a place for him and his girlfriend, and needed some money. I suggested to my parents that they should help him out, but they said that they did not have any money. She said she also knew I was doing not bad for myself financially and can afford to do this for my brother. I did not engage in this conversation. I didn't even bother to explain my answer. I simply told her no. For the next few months my family and I did not talk, and I thought that was that. But my mother reached out asking to come over, and promised not to talk about me lending money at the dinner. I agreed. In hindsight I do not know why. I think she pressured me into saying yes, as I did tell her I wasn't sure, but she kept pressing. Either way, my parents and my brother came over the next week. The dinner went well, but that night I noticed that my watch was gone. It was there earlier in the day. I knew that. I saw it. I searched the house to make sure and confirmed that it was not in my house. My family had to have taken it. I called my mother, and to no surprise she denied it at first. I pressed her over and over, and it was only when I bluffed about having cameras in my house and pressing charges that she cracked. She told me my brother took it and plans to sell it. I told her if he goes through with it I will press charges. I will drag them through the mud, and I expect the watch to be returned to me tomorrow. She tried to yell at me, but I hung up. I sent her a text right after telling her she has until tomorrow night to present me with the watch. Well, she came over the next day with my watch. At first I thought it was a miracle. I was going to get my watch back without any trouble, but as always with my parents, it was not so easy. The watch was broken, it was cracked badly, and it would cost a lot of money to fix. I asked my mother what this was, and she said with a grin, "Your watch. I hope you're not too angry. I accidentally dropped it," chimed in my brother. I saw red at that point and exploded at them. I yelled at them so loud that the neighbors came out and my parents drove off. I spent an hour looking at the watch and crying. I managed to get in touch with someone willing to fix the watch, thankfully, but I could not allow my brother to do such an awful thing and go unpunished. So what I did was quite petty, I have to admit, but it's also something that my brother has coming. I went onto my IG and messaged my brother's girlfriend. "Here is a picture of what your boyfriend did to my grandfather's watch. The watch I cherished." I then went on to say what my brother and parents put me through when I was younger, as well as our backstory. I also asked her if she thought that a 21-year-old man dating being a 16-year-old was normal. She thanked me, and I can guess she left him, because I got so many angry messages and calls from my family blaming me, calling me a vengeful bitch and all sorts of names. I think I'm going to go no contact, and potentially even report my brother's relationship to the police, as his girlfriend revealed to me that he was physically and intimately abusive at times too.
Teachers, what was the saddest thing you've discovered about one of your students? I had a third-grade student who was always sleeping in class. At first I brushed it off because he was out for a couple days before this started for being sick. After the first week, I asked him what was going on when I saw him looking extra tired, very much freaked out, and I noticed a bruise on his wrist. He said he didn't like his bed. I asked why. He said there was blood on it from when saw his mom's ex-boyfriend come over and give her a whooping on it. He laughed embarrassingly and said she was fully unclothed. It was then I realized that man had forced himself onto his mother and seriously hurt on her son's bed while he watched. After calling CPS, I went to a local mattress shop and said I needed a mattress for one of my students who was in need. I kept it vague, but stated that I wanted him to sleep better at home to help him in school. The guy was so sweet and didn't pry and ended up getting the store to donate it with no proof of who arranged it. It just showed up at my student's home, a brand new mattress not tainted with a real-life nightmare. He never mentioned it in class, but I did notice quickly that he was getting the rest he needed. That was several years ago and I just hope he and his mom are okay.
I just found out my fiancé has been roping me. My fiancé is a stay-at-home dad. He does not drink alcohol. He stopped drinking on his own accord due to his violent behaviors when intoxicated, and has never acted like that since. I like to have some beers after work, and especially on the weekends. I ended up starting to have liquor in place of beer. When I started this, on the weekends, I would get too intoxicated. Almost always. Every Friday night, without fail, I'd end up too messed up, smoking some grass, and off to bed I went. After a few weeks of switching to liquor, I'd wake up, and my fiancé would ask me crude questions, jokingly, like how is your a-hole today? The first time he asked me this, I laughed and went you are not serious and he laughed too. Then we'd go about our day. But this happened quite a few times after. He'd always ask the morning after how's your a-hole? Or how's your womanhood? Always weird, but I chalked it up to him just being a bit sour that I was drinking, since he does not. Eventually the question became, do you remember me sleeping with you last night? And again, he said it jokingly. I never realized he was actually serious. This has happened maybe 20 times now. We have been having issues with our baby's sleep schedule. We take turns, as of lately, to get up with the baby when she wakes up early, and it's been destroying us. I stopped drinking liquor a few months ago because of the hangovers and me being asleep. I have since switched back to beer and White Claws. Well, today was his day to wake up with the baby. I had 3 White Claws last night, over the course of maybe 4 hours, but I wasn't intoxicated. So, he did wake up with her, and a few hours later, still before I needed to be up for work, he comes to lay her back down for a nap. I briefly woke up and acknowledged them, and went back to sleep. The next thing I know, our room, which is pitch black due to our curtains, is lighting up sporadically. I see it under my eyelids. Eventually my eyes shoot open, and I realize that my fiancé is in bed with me, just laying the opposite way. I figured he was taking a nap too, maybe on his phone, so I repositioned and got comfy. But then the flashes of light continued. After a minute, I realized, while I was laying on my side, in a nightgown, I realized he was taking pics of me. Not just any flicks, but ones where my womanhood is exposed. When I realized this, I kind of froze. I thought maybe he was doing it as a joke. So I held still and waited. But he kept going. Then I felt him going to town on himself in bed next to me a moment later. The flash must have gone off a good 15 times. Finally he got up, left, and a little while later I woke up and went downstairs to say hi. After a few minutes, he goes, how's your a-hole? And I couldn't help it, but my laugh was really nervous. I'm assuming he caught on to that, and goes, you know I was doing it to you, right? Because you wouldn't give it up last night? I truly didn't know how to respond. After a few seconds I just kinda laughed and went no way, but he was serious. He then hid his phone for a second, I'm assuming deleted some stuff, then showed me the pictures he took while I was sleeping. I was shocked. I didn't know how he'd react if I just started outright calling him a weirdo, so I told him that I looked gross, and to delete them. He wouldn't. So now here I am. I had to call out of work today because I feel physically sick. All those times he told me he had intimacy with me, I do not remember. I was already asleep. And like I mentioned, I thought he was kidding. But once I started piecing things together, like a piece of a corner wrapper of a rubber being in the bed. Clean-up towels. Things like that confirmed he did indeed doing the deed while I was hammered and asleep. I'm very angry, not necessarily with him, but at myself for letting this happen.
What is the biggest adult temper tantrum that you've ever witnessed? I used to work for Goodyear Tire and Auto Stores about 10 years ago. A man, 40s, well-dressed, came in wanting an alignment done on his truck. When they told him a price, he got upset and said that he had purchased a lifetime alignment from us and would not be paying. Our sales guy explained calmly that Goodyear does not, and has never sold lifetime alignments, but Firestone does, and perhaps he is mistaken. The man became furious, insisting that we perform his alignment because he paid for a lifetime alignment, and that if we don't we will sue for breach of contract. Manager gets involved. There's no calming this guy down. He has us check our system and he's never even been to a G store before at all. That just made it worse. Etc. The next few minutes was him yelling incomprehensibly at our manager. Other customers in the lounge, demanding action be taken on his vehicle. Finally the manager says he's calling the cops and the guy goes on a full-blown profanity-induced rampage through our store on the way to the door, knocking over coffee dispensers and cups, a magazine rack, and ends it by kicking open our door. The kick ripped the hydraulic door closer off the wall above the door, and he left. Our manager ran into him a week later at a car dealership. Turns out he was a sales manager there. Our manager walked out and cited that guy's behavior as the reason they just lost a sale. Then he forwarded the security cam video of his rampage to the GM of the dealership. Still not sure what happened on that part.
Am I the a-hole for not inviting a friend to my wedding 13 years ago? I, 37F, got married 13 years ago, but there's a situation that has been bothering me. Back in high school, I had a close friend named Alex, 37 meters. We had a great time together and were part of a larger group at school. Unfortunately, after 10th grade, Alex had to move to a smaller city due to his father's job. It was a difficult transition for him, and we were all sad to see him go. However, as time went on, we all moved on with our lives. Interestingly, out of our big group of friends, which included 10 guys and 2 girls, I was the only one who stayed in touch with Alex. We maintained contact through calls, messages, and emails. After graduating from high school, Alex decided to return to our city alone to pursue further education. I helped him with his move, taking care of things like admissions and making sure he settled in easily. Once he was back, he rejoined our friend group, and things seemed to go back to how they were before. However, as we all pursued different paths in our lives after graduating, I found myself with a demanding job that required long hours and frequent international travel. I couldn't be as involved in everyone's lives as I would have liked. One of our group members, Harry, who was also Alex's close friend from school, stayed connected with both of us. When we were 25, I got engaged and was preparing for my wedding, just a few months away. At a social gathering, I introduced Alex to my fiancée. Unfortunately, Alex was heavily intoxicated despite alcohol not being served at the event. His behavior shocked me, especially at a religious gathering where such behavior is frowned upon. Alex made a casual comment about the people I associated with, leaving me speechless. I approached Harry for an explanation, and he revealed that Alex had been wasting his time drinking excessively and showing up intoxicated at inappropriate times and places. Due to my family's conservative values and the fact that my fiancé's family was also very conservative, our wedding would not involve alcohol. Unsure about inviting Alex to the wedding, I consulted Harry. He confirmed my concerns and explained that Alex rarely listened to advice and had been avoiding him as well. Alex was always intoxicated, making it difficult for them to meet publicly or have meaningful conversations. In the end, I decided not to invite Alex to the wedding. It has been 13 years since then, and he has not spoken to me since. I have tried numerous times over the past 5 to 6 years to apologize and explain my reasons, but he completely ignores me. I understand that I may have made a mistake by not inviting him, but there were genuine concerns driving my decision. I have continuously tried to reach out and mend the relationship, but he seems stuck in his emotions. So, am I truly the one at fault here? I love overhearing dog owners talking to their dogs. Example, I was petting this dog who seemed happy but then suddenly growled at me, so I left. As I turned the corner I could hear his owner saying to him reproachfully, "You always do this, Oscar, you drive away all your friends." I yelled at some parents in a park until the police came. Yesterday was the hottest day of the year thus far, so I went with my family to the local splash pad. A splash pad is basically a public park with lots of sprinklers and fountains that attract families with younger children, like 1 to 8. Some parents play with their children in the water, while others take refuge under the shade of various trees and pavilions on the outside parts of the splash pad. As you can imagine, this particular day was packed. My family had a blast playing in the water. We retreated to our shade tree where we had all of our bags and towels to take a snack break. That's when a lady approached us, holding a small, sobbing girl. The girl couldn't have been older than 2 years old. Also worth noting that the lady was followed by her own kids. I immediately noticed that many of the other people at the splash pad were looking in our direction very intently. The lady proceeded to ask, "Hey, is this girl yours?" She was in the middle of the play area crying and asking for her mom. "Sorry, she's not one of ours," my wife replied. The lady thanked us and proceeded to ask many people around the splash pad. After 20 minutes or so, the lady had gone around the entire park without any luck finding the parents of this poor girl. They stopped under a pavilion and were making a phone call, to who we assumed were the police. Everybody in the park knew that there was a missing girl and was staring at the lady and the girl. That's when my mother-in-law noticed that there was a man and woman just a few feet away from us, who were sunbathing this entire time and didn't look up once. That's when we went over to the lady and child and my mill asked, "Did you ask the couple over there?" "No, I did not." I did shout right next to them, "Is this anybody's child?" And they didn't respond. My mill stooped down and asked the child, "Hi sweetie. What's your name?" "Marcy. Do you know your mommy's name?" Marcy shook her head no. "How old are you?" "I am 2. She replied. "Do you know where your mommy is?" Marcy shook her head no again. My mill proceeded to walk over to the couple while we stayed with Marcy and the lady that found her. She confirmed that she did call the police and that they were on their way. The couple walked over nonchalantly while the entire park was staring. "Is this your child?" the lady who originally was looking for the parents asked. The mother, whose voice was dripping with irritation, "Yes it is." "Okay, here you go." The lady grabbed her daughter and started walking away. My blood was boiling. This lady had no idea where her child was, and had no idea that she was lost and scared. She had no idea that a complete stranger was holding her child and going around the entire park, looking for the parents, for almost 20 minutes. She even walked by them more than once. If they looked up once, they would have noticed. Everyone else in the park noticed. The most important thing was that this child was reunited with her family. Maybe I was out of line for this next part, but I felt like someone had to say something. "You need to be watching your kid, anything could have happened to her." "Oh, she was fine. Our kid should have known where we are." I was horrified that these neglectful parents had another child. Also, why was it the responsibility of practically a baby, who didn't even know her mom's name, to keep track of her parents? No, it's your responsibility to keep track of your kids. The police were called when you couldn't be found and are on their way. With this, the mother and father didn't respond. They just rolled their eyes, and started looking for their other child to make their exit. The way they looked at their daughter when they took her, I just knew that she was going to be in trouble, when her only crime was not having parents who were watching out for her. They hurried and packed their stuff, and just as they were about to get into their car, the lady who found the girl pointed to them. "That's them over there, officer." I didn't hear what was talked about, and I'm not sure the outcome, but I hope that it scared them enough to keep better track of their kids in public. Maybe I'm the bad guy for rocking the boat and injecting myself into the situation and yelling at them. I just see this thing all the time and it makes me mad. Parents go to parks, and completely check out. I get it. Being a parent is tough, it's a thankless job with no breaks, but that doesn't negate your responsibility for your children. What's crazy is that this exact same situation happened last time I visited this same splash pad 3 years ago. Except that time, the mother was completely asleep in the corner of the park and it was the police that woke her up. Just got dumped by my girlfriend, now feeling lost. How do I cope? Throughout my life, I've been searching for connections, whether it was due to a lack of attention from my parents or growing up in a small town. Dealing with ADHD, depression, anxiety, and being on the autism spectrum made forming relationships difficult, as my mental health struggles affected my social skills. 2 years ago, when I was 19, I met my ex-girlfriend who was 18 at the time. We quickly fell in love, and she became everything I had ever hoped for. She provided me with the emotional support and care I had been longing for. It was like a ray of light piercing through my depression, giving me the motivation to keep going. I don't want to delve too much into the details, but she brought me the happiness and support I had yearned for. However, like any relationship, we faced various problems, both small and significant. We had entered into the relationship at a young age, so we expected some bumps along the way. We saw these challenges as opportunities to learn more about each other and grow as individuals. Recently, I believed that we had reached a really good point in our relationship, and it seemed like she felt the same way. Then, on Saturday, July 22nd, she unexpectedly broke up with me. I was completely blindsided by this. We had made promises that if problems arose, we would talk through them. But this time, there was no warning, and I wasn't given a chance to understand what went wrong or why. I don't hate her, but I do feel betrayed. She was not only my girlfriend but also my closest friend. Now that she's gone, I feel utterly alone. In 2 months, I will be moving for school, and I find it incredibly challenging to learn how to make friends again. My parents are not the people I want to confide in, and my sister isn't interested in listening. I have no one to talk to or spend time with. Losing my best friend has caused my self-care routine to crumble. I struggle to eat properly, sleep, and stay hydrated. I hate the idea of moving and I despise this town, my childhood home, and worst of all, myself. This is my first major breakup, and it has dragged me back into my darkest moments. It feels as if I have fallen into a void, and the reasons why I despise my existence have resurfaced with a vengeance. I'm lost, unable to cry or process my emotions effectively. I long for someone to hold me and reassure me that everything will be okay. My mind plays tricks on me when I'm alone, distorting reality, and making it hard for me to stay grounded. I have lost my excitement for life's pleasures. Being lied to that it gets better feels like a betrayal. It seems that one simply becomes more tolerant of the pain. Despite all of this, I want to emphasize that I am not going to end my life, although I understand the desire. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my struggles. It's getting bad again, but I know that reaching out is a step towards healing. My gay supremacist wife is forcing our baby to be a lesbian. She said our daughter would make good scissors. My 33 wife, 35, has been making jokes about how she wants our 18-month daughter to grow up to be a lesbian. She has made this joke several times. I'm taken back each time and ask her if that's what she really wants. She says she's joking, and I've made it clear that saying that makes me uncomfortable. I would have no problem if she did grow up and become a lesbian. I would love her no matter what. It just weirds me out imposing that on her at such a young age. The other night we went out to eat with her friend, who is a lesbian, and the wife said, "Me, doesn't like this, but fingers crossed she is a lesbian." This friend had a field day about it, saying things like she can join Future Lesbians of America Club and I'll be her favorite aunt when she turns 16. I was fuming but didn't know what to say in the moment. I don't want my daughter to be a lesbian would have me looking like a jerk, and that's really not the point. When we left I immediately told my wife those jokes went too far. I did not like anyone talking about my daughter like that. My wife is bi and I asked her if she wishes she was a lesbian, and if she was projecting into our daughter. She said no. I asked if she is planning on influencing our daughter to become a lesbian. She again said no and was offended that I would think that. She says it's a joke on how people talk about kids being straight all the time, which I get, but this approach seems like firefighting fire. She says it is a joke she will stop making and agrees her friend took it too far, but nothing was done to stop the topic of discussion. Now my wife is mad at me for thinking that she would try to influence our child's sexuality. Like, okay, you just spent an hour with your friend calling our daughter a lesbian and you want to play the victim. Be mad. Am I overreacting about making theses jokes about our daughter? Or did my wife just straight up make inappropriate jokes?
Oh, girl, it's you.
What is the most ridiculous thing you've seen when picking your child up from daycare? Not my child, but worth sharing. I was dating a woman who had a 7-year-old daughter. One day the girlfriend asked me if I would pick up Jane, not her real name, from daycare, as she had a doctor's appointment to attend to. This daycare operation was run by the YMCA. I showed up at the appointed time, told the caretaker I was there to pick up Jane, and the caretaker told Jane to gather up her things before going back to her paperwork. While Jane, who knew me as her mom's boyfriend and her occasional babysitter, and who had been told I would pick her up that day, got ready to go, I asked the caretaker, "Do you know who I am?" The caretaker interpreted my question to suggest I was some ultra-important person who expected to be treated with deference. She replied, "No." I then asked, "If you don't know who I am, why are you letting me leave with this child?" She was stuck for an answer. A few weeks later, I was asked again to pick up Jane from daycare. This time, a different caretaker asked to see my driver's license, copied most of the information on it into a log book, and checked that against a very short list of people who were allowed to leave with Jane.
I really want to kick my roommate out. Me and my husband, 25, allowed my best friend to live in our house that we recently purchased. She had fallen on hard times and was about to not have anywhere to live, so my husband and I invited her to move in with us for a little bit to get back on her feet. We all agreed that 6 months to a year is how long she'd be staying with us. We came to an agreement on $400 a month rent, or essentially $100 a week. We didn't care when she paid us for the month, just as long as we had rent by the end of the month. $400 is less than half of what she was paying for rent on her own prior to living with us, plus utilities, so we weren't asking for an enormous amount of money. She moved in and everything was fine for the first couple of weeks. Mind you, she moved back in at the end of May. Only a couple weeks after we had moved in. She said she'd help us finish unpacking, deep cleaning everything, and getting everything set up as a way to say thank you for letting her live with us. We had all sat down together and talked about expectations because she moved in with her dog and cat, and my husband and I have a dog and cat as well. She got a job up here and paid us $200 after the first couple weeks, which was nice because we thought everything was going to work out. We haven't seen a dime since then. She said she was late on her car payment and wanted to get that caught up, which we understood, and asked her, since she was going to be behind on rent, if she could help us around the house with things. I'm currently pregnant and some things have just been harder on me to do. I still work full-time and my husband works nights. She works mostly part-time as a waitress, so she would have the extra time to help. She says she's going to help and do things, but she doesn't ever do what she says she's going to do. As I'm writing this, she's currently over $1,700 behind on rent. I'm now 32 weeks pregnant and we're trying to get the house ready for a newborn, but it's been hard with having to work around her. She sleeps all day, and then when she does work, all she does is come home and complain and do absolutely nothing. To me, it's not worth the extra stress of having to take care of her dog and her cat. Her dog is aggressive and has lunged at me and tried to bite me before, which is not something I want to deal with while pregnant. I don't want to take the risk of getting bit. I don't mind feeding her cat because I have to feed mine as well, but I can't currently scoop the litter boxes, and that's the one thing we've asked her to do that almost never gets done. There's just so many things that she said she'd do but never does. She's more of an expense than a roommate. I'm having a child. I don't need the extra stress of dealing with her. Tonight my husband and I hit our breaking point after I mentioned to him that she purchased tickets for her work friends for them to pay her back. The tickets were probably about $300, $350 total for all of them. So she has the money to do that, but not to pay us at all. She's out all hours of the night. She left the house at 8 a.m. this morning and it's currently 11 at night, and it's fallen on me to care for her dog because if not she'd leave her locked in the crate all day, which isn't fair to the dog. So dealing with her aggressive dog, her lack of paying rent, and her lack of consideration for us, we're at the point of kicking her out. We just can't do it anymore. I'm sorry if this is all jumbled. I was typing this out as things were coming to me. My awful mother-in-law called me a large warloo in my baby shower. But my husband said I'm an ungrateful and spiteful bitch for walking out. Mother-in-law always made comments about my weight ever since I got pregnant. She started making more comments while low-key shaming me for what I eat. Whenever I visited, she'd give me smaller plates, portions, cups, and even spoons. She also buys me small-size clothes even though I'm in my second trimester and those clothes don't fit. My sister-in-law decided to throw me a baby shower and the whole side of my in-laws is invited. My husband denied it when my sister offered to throw me a baby shower, so my mom refused to come after what my husband said to my sister. My sister is infertile. My husband claimed that she's become obsessed with the baby simply because she bought me stuff for the baby as gifts and wanted to throw me a baby shower. My sister is a great person and I do not doubt that she only did all that just because of how great she will be as an aunt. My husband kept insisting there was something wrong with her, which led to a fight between them, and he ended up calling her a possessive bitch. My mom kicked him out and my sister cut contact with him. I got to the baby shower and mother-in-law was in charge of serving food to the guests. All that was served was cakes and juice. I got hungry from talking and I got up to eat some cake. The second I put my hand on the cake, mother-in-law grabbed my arm and said that I'd gained enough weight already and that if I keep this up her son would not be happy living with a large walrus. I was shocked. I didn't know how to react, especially since she said this out loud. She looked at me in a sorry not sorry kind of way. I put the cake down, grabbed my stuff and started walking. Her daughter stopped me saying I can't leave mid-party and embarrass her like that. I told her to tell her mom to leave if she wanted me to stay, but she went off and said, "Are you crazy? She's my mom. You want me to kick her out in front of everybody?" I turned around and kept walking. I called mom to come pick me up and went home. My husband came home looking furious. He asked me to explain what I did at the baby shower and why. I mentioned what his mom did and he started ranting about how I effed this up over something so minor. I told him it wasn't minor in my opinion, since she literally cut me off food and didn't let me eat when I was hungry. He said that his mom meant well and that I needed to get rid of this easily offended mindset immediately before I passed it down to our son. He said that cakes are essential foods and that this was not a good enough reason to walk out of the baby shower that his mom and sister put a ton of money, time, and effort into. He said that I had hours to call and fix things up, but I refused. I went to stay with my mom because he wouldn't stop pressuring me to call and apologize for what happened. He kept talking about how pissed and let down his mom and sister felt and called me ungrateful and spiteful bitch for doing what I did. My boyfriend of 30 years proposed to me and it made my eye roll. He was insulted and called me gold digger. Yesterday after dinner my boyfriend of 30 years proposed to me. He just walked towards me holding a box and said to open it. It was a ring and I had pictured this moment a million different times but never thought I'd be so apathetic. My boyfriend then said he was retired now and wanted to kick back and enjoy life with me. He said that he would love to do it all with me as his wife. A nice speech and all, but from the 5-year mark of our relationship onwards, I had been making clear my deep desire to marry, and was consistently dismissed, given empty promises, and gaslit. We had been through the gamut with therapy. One counselor implied that me telling him we needed to go to therapy and getting his butt on the couch still means nothing if his mind has been made up. I was in denial about the fact he was just giving me the false illusion of progress to stall. My boyfriend and I have 4 kids. The oldest 3 are adults, while the youngest is 15. He was sleeping over elsewhere when this all went down. All of our kids went to a private school filled with typical Southern soccer parents. I had to endure PTA moms' jabs about me not sharing a last name with my kids. Preteen years were hell because the other kids would taunt my kids by saying your dad would rather sin and go to hell than marry your mom. My boyfriend's mom would tell him marriage would be selfish on my part, it is just a piece of paper. Then, my boyfriend ended up rising through the ranks until he became an executive. I was a som, so I felt like there was always a power imbalance, exasperated by the fact I could be tossed any time. I stayed partly because I wanted my kids to have the best life and because I felt lucky and proud to be partnered with such an intelligent, successful man, but also because I loved him. These past few years my boyfriend's career has taken a downturn. He will never be poor, but the company he was part of took a nosedive during 2020 and he made enemies out of associates and board members. He decided to step back from his role and take the generous severance agreed upon. Now he is living off his investments and wants to relax. I did not like how his career ended and how he treated people. I had been deciding whether I wanted to leave and find somebody else after our youngest turned 18. So the proposal was a shock because I hoped that he noticed I had avoided conversations about the future as of late. He rattles on about downsizing our house so we can travel and also cutting back on our other expenses, but we're not married so it's all his money and house anyway. He noticed my eye roll and was offended. He asked what was wrong and I said that suddenly now that he was downsizing I was good enough to marry. He got mad and said that now that he's downsizing and no longer an executive, I suddenly think our relationship is disrespectful. And started implying I was a gold digger. I was so angry I walked out and said I might just go out looking for a respectful relationship because I don't know what respect is anymore.
What is your most embarrassing moment? My parents are old, white, conservative Christian folk who raised me in a strict religious household, a household which I moved out of over 20 years ago and quickly abandoned any semblance of the religion they so desperately wanted to instill in me. I've long since destroyed any notion they have in my spiritual purity as I freely admit to partaking in all of nature's bounty, and tonight I checked one more box on my heathen bingo card. I opted to stay at their house for the Father's Day weekend as I know they always enjoy having their children around. As good Christian folk do, they attended their weekly services this morning and in celebration, I figured I would go watch some corn in their media room while they were gone because man things. Unfortunately, my attempts to degrade myself were thwarted by a myriad of technical glitches I was having trying to airplay my screen to the point that I gave up and took care of business elsewhere. So tonight after dinner, we were sitting in their media room discussing some work projects of mine and decided to show my father some design projects on my laptop. Knowing full well what I had been using it for previously, I was very careful to make sure that I had closed all the windows from the day's prior activity so that nothing objectionable would appear on the screen. I opened up the content I wanted to show and got it ready to throw it up. Feeling confident in my work, I airplayed my desktop to the screen. After a couple of seconds, the screen changes and bam, young black women on top of a snow bunny. Whoa! I yelped as I smashed my mousepad in a panic trying to close it out. Within a couple seconds, the screen went black and my well-curated desktop appeared. All I can figure is that the Roku box somehow had stored the last image it saw from my laptop earlier in the day and displayed that first before showing what I was actually trying to send. Either way, the damage was done, and without saying anything, I carried on with our previous discussion. Who is universally thought of as hot that you think is average at best? I've always been mystified by the idea of universally attractive people. You know who I mean, the ones that supposedly make everyone weak at the knees, regardless of personal preferences or tastes. And there's one in particular who I just don't get the hype about. Jennifer Lawrence. Don't get me wrong, I can see why people find her attractive. She's got a nice face, a decent body, and some serious acting chops. But I just can't bring myself to think of her as anything more than average. It's not even that she's unattractive, it's just that she's not the goddess that so many people make her out to be. But I guess everyone's got their own preferences. And it's not like I'm immune to celebrity crushes myself. There are a few actors and musicians out there who make my heart skip a beat every time I see them grace my screen or my headphones. But the most exciting and raw attraction I've ever experienced was with someone who wasn't a celebrity at all. He was just a regular guy, or at least, that's what I thought at first. I met him in a dingy little bar downtown, while nursing a drink and trying to forget about my ex. We struck up a conversation, and before I knew it, he had me laughing and blushing like a schoolgirl. He had an easy smile, a wicked sense of humor, and a way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only person in the world. We ended up going back to his place that same night, and let me tell you, the sparks were flying. I won't go into too much detail, but suffice it to say that he knew how to use his hands and his mouth in ways that left me breathless and wanting more. We kept seeing each other for a few weeks after that, always with the understanding that we were just having fun and not looking for anything serious. But there was something about him that kept drawing me back in, something that went beyond his killer sense of humor and bedroom skills. I started to notice little things about him that made my heart swell. The way he always held the door open for me, the way he made me coffee in the mornings when I slept over, the way he talked about his dreams and ambitions with such passion and determination. And then, just as suddenly as he had swept into my life, he was gone. He stopped answering my calls and texts, and when I went to his apartment to check on him, he was nowhere to be found. It was like he had vanished into thin air. I was heartbroken and confused. Had I done something wrong? Was he just using me for intimacy all along? I tried to move on, but no one else seemed to compare to him. And then, one day, I saw a familiar face on the news, his face. It turned out that he was a wanted criminal, and had been on the run from the law for months. I was shocked and terrified, but at the same time, something else stirred within me, a dark and dangerous passion that I had never felt before. And suddenly, I understood why some people are drawn to danger and adrenaline, even when it's irrational or dangerous. I knew that I could never go back to him, not after what he had done, but a part of me would always be haunted by the memory of his wicked grin and his rough hands. I wanted to know what he was doing, where he was, and if he was ever going to come back. I wanted to feel that thrill of danger and excitement again. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started researching his past, trying to find out what had happened to him and where he might be now. I started tracking down old friends and acquaintances, asking questions and digging up clues. I followed every lead I could find, determined to find out the truth. And then, one day, I finally tracked him down. I was standing outside his hideout, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what he would say when he saw me, or what I would do if he tried to run. All I knew was that I had to see him again, no matter the cost. So, I took a deep breath, and stepped inside. How is life going for those who asked for a pencil every day in school? In high school I used to ask for pencils almost every day. Constantly asking for pencils just showed how disorganized my life was and how much I hated being alive. I'm 30 now and I work in an office. I absolutely hate my life. The company I work for is terrible. The managers and supervisors are the worst. Everyone in the company is a liar and a scammer. They're all selfish narcissists who only care about themselves and how they're going to make money. I only get a 30-minute break and that's unpaid. My salary is slightly above minimum wage, so I don't even make much money. My job is so boring. I sit in a cubicle wasting my life away organizing files and answering emails. I can't even listen to music or watch my hot anime girls. I tried once, but my boss came in and saw. She yelled at me and threatened to fire me for inappropriate behavior. I flicked her off and told her to leave me alone. I've also fallen into a deep depression because I'm addicted to certain substances. I live alone in a nasty apartment in Detroit. My apartment is so disgusting and dirty because I don't have the energy or the spirit to clean it up. No one visits me because I have no friends. My parents are gone so I don't have any family. All of my coworkers talk about me behind my back. I'm constantly forgetting where I put my pens and pencils so I always ask my coworkers to let me borrow some. Every person in my department despises me and I don't even have the energy to care. I'm just a gross 30-year-old man with a patchy beard and 4 very visible bald spots. My teeth are decaying because I barely go to the dentist and I've been getting blemishes and bumps all over my butt. I should have learned how to be happy and organized in high school. If I did, then maybe my life would be better. My husband cheated on me without a green card, so now he has to pick between never seeing his parents or his daughter again. My husband, 25M, and I have a 6-month-old baby. I work part-time only to supplement our income and to pay for the legal process of getting him documented. We are very fortunate that it seems it may be an easy process, maybe a maximum of 2 years for his residency. But now I'm going to cancel everything and ask for a divorce. My routine used to be that I wake up 2 hours before him in the morning, make him lunch, pack everything for him for work, and have his breakfast, coffee and clothes ready for him to wake up, eat, get dressed and head out within 30 minutes. He used to be satisfied with what I packed for him, such as freshly made chicken and salad or some sort of chicken wraps, etc. Pure, healthy food. I did this because I wanted to make his life easier and show him that I cared and loved him. And I've done this since we first moved in together more than 3 years ago. Recently I've had to start including dinner leftovers because he started asking for more food, claiming he was still hungry afterward, which I thought was odd because no matter if I work or not, he always comes home to freshly made dinner. So even if he wasn't full, he would be okay. But I explained it away, thinking maybe he's bulking or something. So I started including what I normally take to work, which has caused me to either go without lunch and have to wait until after work, or be late for work because I have to wait until the food is ready. I also take some because I'm breastfeeding and can't miss eating every time. Well, last week when I was packing his lunch, I found an unrecognized second fork in his lunchbox and it was thrown off. So I asked and he said he found it in the kitchen at work and brought it home. I had noticed small changes in him that I gaslighted myself into thinking I'm being insecure because I just had a baby, but this made the pit of my stomach chum. A few days later, I decided to go to his work during lunch to surprise him with dessert and for him to see the baby. That was when I found out why he wanted more food. His coworker, whom he told me no longer worked there, whom I caught him talking overly friendly to, and whom he told me he deleted from social media, not only still worked there, but was eating the lunch I freshly prepared for him and he was eating the leftovers. I didn't cause a scene. Instead, I took pictures and added them to my folder of everything he's done before, from simply liking other girls' stories after telling me he didn't, to explicit photos of a coworker from a previous job. He got fired from that job because of her. I drove home crying, packed my things, took the bassinet and anything I'd need for the baby and my essentials and went to my sister and brother-in-law. I told them everything and even showed them our conversations from WhatsApp where he told me she no longer worked there. I normally text him throughout the day, so he was confused when I hadn't messaged him yet and started texting me to see if I was okay, but I just ignored him. Then he got to the house an hour earlier than usual, which also has me questioning if he's been lying about what time he gets off and saw mine and the baby's things gone. There was a letter stating that he had 7 days to leave my house and that he can communicate with my mother to see the baby when I'm at work or whenever he wants to see her. Just let her know and I'll drop off the baby with her. For the time being, I don't want anything to do with him. I left the printed photos of them eating lunch and laughing together under the letter. Later that night, when I decided I no longer wanted anything to do with him, I informed the lawyer who was working on his residency that I no longer needed his services. Then I messaged the lawyer privately to ask if I could maybe move our contract and the money I've paid so far over to his divorce and family practice. Unfortunately, he said no. There's some clause that if we decide to no longer move forward, we lose the money we've invested. But oh well, that's just the price I have to pay. This caused my soon-to-be ex-husband to panic, because now if he doesn't get his papers, he has to choose between his daughter and parents. He must either risk never seeing his parents and family again, or never seeing his daughter again if he goes back to his home country. My sister tells me to leave him, but not to divorce so he can't get with anyone else and get residency. But I can't do that to him. I just needed to put this out there to solidify it in my brain and to be able to reflect that this is now a pattern. He has gone beyond disrespecting me by now, also making me make his affair partner food. I basically went from an independent, educated career woman to a 1950s housewife with a job in school, all because I blindly fell for this man. When I say I feel stupid, that's an understatement. Update 1. I asked him why he felt the need to do what he did, and he said he never meant to hurt me. He loves his daughter and me, but he enjoyed the attention he got from his affair partner. It was something new and exciting that took his mind off the stress of bills, kids, my emotional state, and the general routine. His life had gotten boring, and she entertained him. As for his housing situation, apparently he's found someone to let him sleep in their trailer, so I guess he's not completely homeless. This morning, I woke up to my husband's call. He apologized again, but I'm still not budging. His apology, which sounded more sincere this time, was only after the fact. He realized he wasn't special to his affair partner, just another one of the many guys she slept with. And when I say sincere, it's because he didn't have many excuses. Instead, he seemed to hold himself accountable by saying he had won the lottery with me and messed up. He begged for a second chance because he didn't know what came over him. He says he hates coming home to an empty trailer and that he misses seeing his daughter after work. What took me up was when he said he used to feel more exhausted when he came home to us because the baby would be excited to see him and would cry to be held by him. During the week, I would often leave the same easy meals for him so he could eat while I left for work, and he started to feel tired of it. It was a boring routine of the same foods during the week, coming home and having to watch the baby so I could go to work. That solidified to me that I don't ever want to find another relationship, much less go back to him. The routine I worked so hard to put my family together was a chore to him. I literally dealt with a fussy, tired child till he got home, so she would mostly sleep and he would only need a single bottle for her. But even that was too hard. He said he would give up the world just to get back into his routine, because now he comes home to an empty trailer where it's just a bed and a fold-out table. He hasn't eaten his diet because he doesn't have time to prepare meals. He started spending money on lunch because he doesn't have food made for him. He says he misses the baby so much that he cries now when he goes home. I told him, I don't know what to tell him about that, but if he wants to see the baby when I go to work, he can go see her at my mom's, who now babysits for me. I hung up on him after this because I had to go and I couldn't stand talking to him anymore. I don't think I've ever cried so hard in my life before. And it doesn't help that it's raining today. Update 2. I was logging off for a while, but I figured I'd update everyone to let you know that the affair partner found my home and started harassing me. I guess she was engaged and was about to go from a visa to residency because of her fiancé, but somehow he found out about her relationship with my husband and she thinks it was because of me. She threatened to ruin my car like I ruined her relationship, which isn't just hypothetical but also ironic. She believes it was me, but I don't even know who her partner was. And since around 4 p.m. today she's punctured one of my tires, wrote home wrecker on my front bay window, and has been spam calling and texting my phone with different numbers. This is all since this afternoon and I called the police, but by the time they showed up she was gone and they said I had no proof of what she was doing. Unless they find her in the act or I have definitive proof, their hands are tied. My mom and stepdad said they will put up cameras around my home and my mom is keeping my car at her place. They want me to stay with them too, but I don't want to leave my home in case she tries something against it. The most I was able to get is a police officer patrolling the area, meaning they will be in the area and randomly pass by. I'm not sure what to do. I don't even know who her partner is, and I'm already dealing with leaving my husband, and now she's harassing me. I feel like things are just going from bad to worse.
What's something everyone should experience in their lifetime? Seeing the Milky Way. A healthy non-toxic relationship. Looking at a clear sky full of stars. Done that on a beach with a clear sky on a starry night and saw 5 shooting stars in 10 minutes. I was fully amazed. Getting a hug from someone who has been waiting all day to see you. Living by yourself. The Northern Lights. They really are beautiful. Getting to know people that aren't like you. Financial security. I've never had it, and that simple fact has caused me more stress and anxiety than I care to admit. I do believe that though money can't bring happiness, when you don't have it, it can absolutely hinder it greatly. Astronomy. Seeing the planets with your own eyes is an experience I will never forget. Watching the ocean at night in the dead of winter on a silent beach, I've never felt more connected to the history of everything than at those times. Traveling outside their country of birth.